units 9 and 10. We had a deal. Do you remember the deal? Which was what exactly? Work on the questions for unit 10 immediately. And you had the rest of the weekend to work on 9, but hopefully you worked on 10 immediately. And it's going to stick if you practice right after class, because if you waited till last night to work on this, you probably forgot some things. You're adults, you make your decisions. However, I can just try to give you the best advice I can from this position who's only been doing it for 2 decades. No big deal. Trying to look out for you guys. Let's get started. Unit 10. There we go. Okay, here we go. Page 243. Question 1. The northwest quarter, the northeast quarter, the southwest quarter describes a tract of how many acres?
C.
All we have to do, because we know that this description of your property is contained within a what? Look, I'm underlining it. It's contained within a what? A section. A section is how many miles on each side? It's not 6. You're thinking of a township. Okay, let's back up. There's a box created by intersecting vertical lines 6 miles apart. What are these lines referred to as? Starts with an R.
Range.
Range lines with horizontal lines 6 miles apart. What are these lines referred to as? Township tier lines. And when you intersect those lines, they make a box 6 miles on each side. What is this box referred to as? That's called a township. 6 by 6. How many square miles is that? It's 36 square miles. We call each one of these square miles a what? Starts with an S. Section. And we're located within one of those sections, one of those square miles, 1 square mile, 1 mile on each side. And the key to answering this question is knowing how many acres are in 1 square mile, which is 640 acres in 1 square mile in a section. And what this description is saying, if you understand the logic, you own a quarter of a quarter of a quarter of that section. So all you had to do was put 640 in your calculator and simply divide by 4. How many times? Oops. Divide by 4, divide by 4, divide by 4. Hit that equal sign, and you have how many acres? 10 acres would be the correct answer. Any questions? All right, let's move on to question 2. Which legal description contains 120 acres? What's your answer?
D.
It is D, but let's see if it's true. Let's confirm. How many properties do we see here? How do you know there's 2 properties? Yeah, think of the word and as a plus or an addition symbol. So if it's 2 separate properties, you have to do 2 separate calculations. You see, we separate them. Let's do a calculation for each one of these. What number do we place in our calculator to begin with? 640. And what type of math do? We divide by what first? We divide by 4. Exactly. Uh-oh. Come on. We divide by 4, and then we divide by what number? 2. So it's as simple as that. 640 in your calculator, divide by 4, divide by 2, hit that equal sign, and you have 80. And we repeat the process for the second property. We put 640 in our calculator, and we divide by 4 how many times? 2 times. Divide by 4, hit that equal sign, and what do you get? You get 40. So now you add the two figures together because they're saying total. 80 plus 40 is 120 acres. So it does confirm the correct answer is D as in Delta. Any questions here? All right, let's move on. Number 3, what'd you get? Meets refers to distance. Bounds refers to direction. The correct answer is B as in Bravo. 4, what'd you get? It's actually C, land in concise symbols and words. 5, the answer is in the question. Look what it says. Located 3 township tiers south. That's T3S. Look what it says. 3 township tiers south. T3S. Is there an answer that has T3S? Correct answer is B as in Bravo. Remember, you write, think of STR, section, township tier line, and then the range line. That's the order. So if we're just describing a township, it's just the tier line and the range line. You put the tier line first, then the range line. Anyhow. Number 6, a check measures C, 24 miles on each side. We just reviewed this. A box created by intersecting range lines and township tier lines is a D township, 6 miles on each side, 36 square miles. Each square mile is referred to as a section. Number 8, it says a vertical strip of land 6 miles wide, beginning at the principal meridian, extending 6 miles along the length, east along the length of the principal meridian. They're not doing a good job of describing this, but let me give you a visual of what they're trying to tell you. This dot is Tallahassee, which means the vertical line going through Tallahassee is called the principal meridian. And they're saying if you move 6 miles east, perpendicular to the principal meridian, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, what line do you end up at? Well, each one of these vertical lines at 6 miles apart is a range line, R, and it's the first to the east, right? To the east of the prime meridian, so it'd be R1E is our answer that reflects that. It's A, range 1 to the east. Any questions? When in doubt, please draw it out. I'll paraphrase 9. If you're located here, this township, T1N R1E, what's the township directly above that called? Well, if we could use some logic, if I can get your attention. If we're already located at the first box above the baseline, tier 1 to the north, what's the box or directly above that referred to as? Tier 2 to the north. That's all they're asking us. Nothing else changes. So the answer is C as in Charlie. They didn't tell you to go to the west or to the east. They just said the box directly above that. So the range does not change. 10 is D as in Delta. It's asking what's false. Number 11 is B as in Bravo, STR. Remember that. Section, township range. 12, the northern boundary of section 36, tier 1 to the south, range 1 to the west is located. You should draw this out. And I'll show you, I'll give you a quick visual of this. Let's say this dot right here is Tallahassee. And the vertical line going through Tallahassee is called the what? Prime principal meridian. Horizontal line going through Tallahassee is the what? It's the baseline. You got it. And we're at the first box below the baseline. That's T1S. And we're at the first box to the west of the prime meridian. That's R1W. That's what they're describing here. So I just recreated it. And if we could label it, once again, first box to the south of the baseline, that's T1S. And then the first box to the west of the prime meridian, R1W. And it creates this box. How many miles on each side? 6 miles on each side. This box is referred to as a what? A township. Are you understanding? 6 miles on each side. 6 by 6. How many square miles is that? I'm repeating it. It's 36 square miles. So here's the thing. you need to draw out all 36. Try to make this as pretty as possible. Can't make any promises though. All right. Thank you. A little bit of practice. Okay, that is 6 by 6. 36 square miles. Each square mile is referred to as a what? Starts with an S. So there's 36 sections in a township, and I depicted that here. Now, they said that we're on the northern boundary of section 36, right? Northern boundary, section 36. We have to label each one of these sections to understand where 36 is. We always start in the upper right, northeast corner with section number 1 and measure or number in a what type of fashion? Yeah, we label in a snake-like fashion. So it would look like this until we get to 36 would be the last one. So it would end up here. And that's what we need because they're saying we're located here, the northern boundary of section 36 of that particular township. Do you follow so far? Cool. So now that we have that known or a visual of it, what answer is accurate? Let's go through each one of these. It can't be A because A says 6 miles south of the prime meridian. Well, the prime meridian is going from north to what? To south. How do you find 6 miles south of a line that's north to south? There's no way to find that specific point. That answer doesn't make any sense. Unfortunately, it's out. Neither can we find B because it says 35 miles west of the baseline. Well, the baseline is west to east, isn't it? How do you find 35 miles west of a line that's west to east? There's no starting point. There's no way to find anywhere on that line where this is located. We can find C, but it's not correct. Why? It says 25 miles west of the prime meridian. Look, this dot is Tallahassee, so that means this vertical line is the what? This vertical line is the, what do we call it? Vertical line going through Tallahassee. Prime or principal meridian. And this is saying 25 miles west. We're located right here. Each one of these sections is how many miles on each side? It's 1 mile on each side, right? So we're only within 1 mile of the prime meridian. 25 miles west. I mean, each one of these sections is 6. That'd be 12, 18, 24, 25 is like right here. It doesn't work. So it's got to be D, but let's see if it's accurate. 5 miles south of the baseline. If you look up here, this is the baseline, and each one of these sections is 1 mile apart. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Correct answer is D for that reason. When in doubt, draw it out. Don't try to do it in your head. And you can see why based on this. And they give you a scrap sheet of paper so you can write down your notes or make your depictions and so forth. And the answer should reveal itself to you if you draw it specifically for this unit. So that's why I wanted you to get practice immediately. So that way you can go through those motions, understand how it works. But we do a review for a reason. So let's move on. Number 13, what'd you get? It's D as in Delta. If you need me to go through any of these, just let me know. 14, what'd you guys get? It's B as in Bravo. Any questions? Do you need me to go through this? Let me just describe something to you. If you own a quarter of a section, look what it says. Just mathematically speaking. How many acres are in a section? 640. Yeah, you're right. You can say it louder. Have that confidence. And it says you own a quarter of that. So you take that and divide by 4. That's what he would own, but then he sold half. So you take that and divide it by 2, and you get your answer. It's not complicated. The math for this unit, you should be ecstatic if you receive a question, math question on your exam from unit 10. You're thinking, okay, I got at least one math question, right? Not that you won't get other ones correct, but you understand what I'm saying. It's that easy. 15. Yeah, it's B as in Bravo. All right, let's move on to Unit 9 questions. We had a little bit of math. First time we encountered math in our course. We're in the second week of class. Man, time is flying. Question 1. Which type of easement gives an electric company the authority to install and maintain electric power lines? A, in gross, also known as utility easements. You could write down utility easements next to that if you want. Utility easements. Like power lines, the green electric boxes sitting on people's front lawns. These are examples. The right for utility company to have access to your property for utility purposes, even if it's located in your backyard, behind your fence. They have the authority to access those boxes and whatever items associated with utilities. Now, some people don't like this, and you got to be careful because there's scams associated with it. So you want to verify that they're really with the utility company. You've heard of these before, people dressing up and then kind of scoping out the house, right? But regardless, you have to give them access if they provide the correct credentials. Number 2, the government may take property of an owner who died without legal heirs through a process called. Sounds like you're getting what by the state? Yeah, cheated by the state. Correct answer is C as in Charlie. Good job. Number 3, for a deed to be valid, a competent. What's your answer? Grantor and 2 witnesses, adult witnesses, must sign the instrument. You got it. The grantee, the person receiving the deed or party receiving the deed, do they have to be competent or sign the deed? No. And that's why you can even give property to your what? Kids, or sometimes your pets. There's a cat. Not monkey or something. All right, number 4. The type or form of deed most commonly used to clear clouds on title of real property is the. Yeah, let's review real quick. I feel like I was a little bit off when I was describing quitclaim deed, so that's why I went back and described it again. Usually I describe it in a different way that clicks and makes a little bit more sense. But I can admit it was a little bit confusing the first time around when I was describing the quitclaim deed. But I could say this, the quitclaim deed is unique for a couple of reasons. Not only does it have no warranty of title. So I described if I sell my property to you and I give you a quitclaim deed, I'm saying thank you for your money, here's the property, good luck. And that's why it's so important, it's so imperative to pay for a title search to reveal any defects. You can use any one of these types of deeds, right? But some deeds are more preferred than others. Quitclaim deed is one of those deeds that's not preferred, if we're just frankly speaking about it, because there's no warranty of title, no protection against title defects, clouds, like a lien attached to the property. And another reason why this is unique is because it has no covenant of season. We'll have a question about that, but what is the covenant of season? If you can recall, I can describe it to you. It makes the grantor swear that they own the property and therefore have the right to transfer title, ownership rights. The quitclaim does not have that promise. So I can sign a quitclaim deed for your property. I'm not swearing that I own your property. I'm just quitting any claim I have to your property. And that's why this type of deed could be used for other circumstances, not just quitting your claim of ownership. It could be used for that. But what about if I attached a lien to your property? You pay me what's owed, I can sign a quitclaim deed, quits my claim against your property. That's enough to remove that lien. A lien is a claim. So it's unique for that reason. The other deeds don't have that ability. So we talked about a pool constructed in your backyard you didn't pay. You pay the company what's owed, and then in exchange, you can get them to sign a quitclaim deed to free your property of that cloud, that defect, that problem, that lien. You could also use this deed to add or remove people from the deed. I give you an example of me maybe adding my spouse. But let's move on. Bargain and sale deed. The difference, it has no protection against title defects, but it does have the season clause. So the bargain and sale deed, even though it doesn't have any protection, still you have to swear that you own the property if you're using this deed. So it can only be used for transfer of title, ownership rights. not like a quick claim. And then the special warranty deed, it has the season clause, makes you swear you own the property, and it has limited protection, special protection. If I use this deed to transfer my property to you, the special warranty deed, I'm saying while I own the property, I didn't cause any issues. I didn't cause any title defects. And if there is a legal problem that arises that I caused, I'm going to clear title for you once again. You're probably thinking, isn't that the same thing as title insurance? Yes, it is. And most people have title insurance and they turn to title insurance first to clear that problem because that's what you pay for. That's the insurance. But insurance companies, they don't like to pay out and they find every excuse not to pay out. So now you can turn to the type of deed that was given to you for another layer of protection, and you can hold the previous owner accountable for clearing title for you once again. Isn't that interesting? And then the general warranty deed is the most protection you can get. That's why most people request, if you know about it, to get the general warranty deed. And it's so popular that even though you don't specify the type of deed to be delivered, they must automatically provide the general warranty deed. So if you don't specify in the sale contract, it's automatically assumed that that's what they're going to get. So if you didn't intend on protecting them against past, present, giving them further assurance, you should have specified otherwise. Okay, so let's move on. Does that help you understand a little bit better? Now the other questions we have are going to make a little bit more sense. And I just mentioned this to you. If the sale contract does not specify the type of deed to be delivered, the seller is required to provide a general warranty deed. Oops, I selected the wrong one. A is an alpha. 6, the process of taking property under the power of eminent domain is the, yes, the process is condemnation. The power for them to do so, the authority is called eminent domain. So the right is eminent domain, the process is condemnation. Remember that. 7, the type of deed in which the grantor does not warrant the title in any manner except acts that they may have caused. We just mentioned this is a special. While they own the property is what they're protecting you against. 8, the covenant against encumbrances in a deed is designed to guarantee that the what? Yeah, it's A as an alpha. 9, in answering questions pertaining to quality of title, real estate license, Z's are B, yes. You are not qualified to give your opinion of title. It says if you're aware of something, you should disclose it. I would tell you, don't take on that liability. Because what if you disclose something that you think you know about, but you don't have all the details, and you scare a buyer away from purchasing the property because you saw a lien in public records? It's public for a reason. Everybody has access to this information. If you're a homeowner, I can see your whole life story in regard to that property, how much you paid, when you bought it, who sold it to you, who's on the deed, size of your house, square footage, bedrooms, bathrooms, location, everything. I could pull up your deed in public records. So even though you could pull up this information, I'm just telling you, don't let the title company do the job, is what I'm saying. I do title searches for my own property. So if I'm going after an investment property, I'm going to pay. I don't need to pay for a title search because I've been in the business long enough on the investment side where I can go into public records. I can see information about your property. I can see if there's a lien attached to it. I can see when the lien was attached. I can see if there's penalties. I can calculate how long it's been since you paid the penalties, and based on the information, what you owe today, all of that stuff. And that's relevant to me as an investor. If I'm going to buy it cash, blind, foreclosure auction, I assume the risk. So I got to know the risk involved. 10, the season clause in a deed, we just went through this, makes a grantor swear that they own the property, therefore have the right to sell it or transfer title. D as in Delta. Number 11, the provision in a deed that names the parties and contains a granting clause is the A premises section. Located at the top of the deed, first section we talked about. 12, the developer states that homes in a specified development cannot be less than 1,800 square feet. This is an example of, subdivision restrictive covenant. different from a deed restriction, which limits future owners on what they can do with a specific property. Restrictive covenants are for an entire community of homes. 13, and even though those two terms might be used interchangeably, that's the subtle difference between the two. An example of an encumbrance on title to real property does not include D, premises clause in a deed long answer. 14, the lender's title insurance policy is C, issued for the loan balance and is transferable. Major difference between those two policies, the owner's policy and the lender's policy, is that the transferability. With the owner's policy, it could be inherited after you pass away. But if you sell the property, the new owner has to get their own policy of title insurance to protect them and their family, their legal heirs. But the lender's policy, if you got financing, the lender's going to require this. They say it's transferable because we could sell your debt. And since your debt is transferable, your debt is sold, so is the policy attached to it. Which lien is first in priority to be paid? A, property taxes, top of the list. This is math. Take out a calculator. Let's go through this together. A business has a 5-year variable lease for a suite and office park. The first year of the lease is $2,150. It says, based on an index of 189, the index increases to 195 at the beginning of the second year. What's the adjusted or new rental rate? We have some handouts, provided you some handouts for this. So the variable lease is 2 basic steps. It should take you no longer than 20 seconds to solve this problem if you know what you're doing. So you have to dedicate this formula to memory. Can you bring formulas with you to take your state exam? No, you cannot. I mean, you could bring it to the testing site and you could study all the way to the point where they make you put your belongings away in a locker and then you're on your own. So the advice I provide to you, and usually I save this for when we get into the math section of our course. As soon as you put your belongings in a locker, you sit down in front of a computer screen, they give you the scrap sheet of paper, write down all the formulas that you can recall. This has saved people a tremendous headache by trying to summon formulas. And usually the first 90 questions are non-math questions, principles, practices, law. So you focus all of your energy on these first 90 questions and you think you're confident. And then you're like, oh crap, here's the math section. What is that formula again? Get it out of your head, put it on paper, set it to the side. Don't look at it until you get to the math section of your exam. It's going to help you out tremendously. Anyhow, you take your new index, which they tell us in the question is 195, and you divide it by the original, which is 189. Go ahead and do that math. And you should get 1.01 or 317, something like that. Yeah, 195 divided by 189, and you get 1.0317 continues on. Leave it in your calculator because we're going to need it for the next step. Now you multiply by your original rent. Well, they told us the original rent in the question. It's not like they hid it from us, or we had to figure it out. It's $2,150. So take what's in your calculator, multiply it by 21.50 cents, 21.5. And then you get your new rental rate. Look how simple that is. That's our new rental rate. Telling me I only have to do that calculation once a year? Yeah, if that's what side of the business you're on. Very easy. Does that reflect one of our answers, one of our choices? Correct answer is A, is an alpha. Any questions? All right, while we're at it, since we're on math, let's work on 20, because that's the same handout. A retail business rents a space in a mall with a lease that called for a monthly minimum rent of $2,000 a month plus 5% of annual gross sales in excess of $400,000. If your sales are $550,000, what's the total annual rent? So this is how I like to organize it, guys. I made these handouts for you guys, and now it's the standard for most people that teach this math throughout the state of Florida for real estate math, if not the nation. I'm pretty sure it's caught on. We just simplify it. We make it easy for you guys. So what's in the textbook, even though we've been preaching a certain way and methodology, they've taken some of our examples, actually a lot of it, and incorporated it into the textbook, but still, there are certain things that could be simplified, and this is one of them. This is the order. I like to calculate the base rent first. What's the base rent? Base rent, $2,000 a month, right? But we need to know annual, so simply multiply by 12, and what do you get? 24,000. Isn't that simple math? We're going to need that for step number 3, That's why it's color coordinated for you guys, even though it's not on your, I know you have black and white, but you have the PDF version of it. And now step number 2 is to calculate the percentage they're charging you on your sales. This is the process, 2-step process. First of all, what were your sales for the year? 550,000. But they said if you go over what number? 400,000, which we obviously did, right? We went over by how much? Can't you just do the math in your head? 150,000 is how much more sales we had. And they said we want a percentage of that 150,000. So all you had to do is multiply by what percent? 5 or 3? 5? Okay. When you multiply, let's see what it looks like. I already know the answer, but you multiply by 0.05 and you get 7,500. And now we need that for step number 3. We add. The last step is to add base rent plus your additional rent for your sales, and then you get a total annual rent of 3150 or 500. Does it make a little bit more sense now? Yeah. After we went through it? You guys should not have a problem with this whatsoever. The correct answer is D as in Delta. Any questions here? All right, 17. What'd you get? All right, so I'll read it out. A married couple signed a contract. I'll make it simple. When you bought the house, you found out that the neighbor's garage is on your property line or past your property line. That's an example of what? Encroachment. They're encroaching on your property. Does anybody watch American football? Anybody excited for the Super Bowl? Maybe, maybe not. Anyhow, I know you guys are online, Bob and Abby. Maybe you're not Eagles fans. I don't know. That would be kind of crazy, but
I mean, I got my Eagles on.
okay, all right. I can't see you right now, but
Yeah.
I appreciate the sentiment. What is going to be Eagles Chiefs, right? In the Super Bowl?
Yes,
I just
sir.
wait for the Super Bowl. That's it. That's all I do. I wait for the Super Bowl. But anyhow, if it's encroaching on your property and which is unauthorized use of your property and it exists for how many years? Do you remember? Same thing as squatters' rights. 7 years, then they basically took your property. You don't have any right to push them back. That's called an implied easement. After 7 years, it's an implied easement. They threw that in there to confuse you as one of your answers. It's not the correct answer. Encroachment is correct, but if it was 7 years, if they added that, then it would be implied. If a pathway to a property has been used continuously without interruption, so authorized use for over 20 years, this is a easement by prescription, like the example of that pathway next to my old elementary school, used for 20 years. Nobody said anything. They fought for it, and it's permanent now. Soon after a man's death, at least they're consistent in the book. Have you noticed that? You haven't noticed, okay. Yes. Listen, it's not I'm not being shallow or petty or anything, but you've been doing this long enough. If you've been doing this as long as I have, then you notice certain things, trends in the textbook. And I tell you, like the answers, the correct answers, shortest, longest, all these things. One of the trends is, and this used to be the case for since the beginning, when the first edition of the textbook, there's a woman that is responsible. She's a pioneer of real estate education and took all of these principles, practices, laws, and put it into one textbook that's now the standard for the state of Florida, the one in front of you. And we even help out with editing. Her name is Linda Crawford, but she's retiring. And she's passing the baton to Denise. When Linda was in charge, and I've met her on several occasions. I just never put her on the spot and asked her about this because I didn't want to, like a black widow circumstance. You might notice some trends. Anytime somebody's in violation of something in the textbook, it's always a man. Yes, I'm not kidding. Anytime somebody has to die in the textbook to prove a point, who always dies? The man always dies. They're making subtle changes to it and they're trying to like balance. But it's still there's residue. There's still Linda's fingerprints in the textbook. This is one example of that. And I met her. I've met her probably like 6 different times because I go to seminars and stuff like that. Anyhow, so pay attention now. And whenever they talk about ownership of something, ownership of a brokerage, ownership of land, who always owns? It's always the woman that owns. And when somebody benefits after the spouse passes away, who benefits usually? You'll see. Soon after a man's death, a deed was discovered in his desk. The deed is for the man's home. It was deeded to a charity, but the man is survived by his son who discovered the deed. The man died intestate. What does intestate mean? With or without a will? Without a will. Based on this information, for a couple of reasons, the property belongs to it's C. Okay, here's the thing.
I'll let that apply to the test.
Oh,
They'll make it so easy.
I'm gonna share something with you about this particular example, this scenario, because you might be a little bit confused. It says it was deeded to a charity, right? Why doesn't it go to the charity? Because in order to make the property transfer voluntary, you remember voluntary alienation? A valid deed, which it was made valid, they signed it over to the charity prior to his passing, but then it has to be delivered to the new owner, accepted by them. And you can't do that after death. So you can make a deed valid before you pass away, but it has to be delivered to the grantee, accepted by them. In this case, it would have been the charity, but it didn't happen. It was discovered in his desk. So based on this information, the property belongs to the legal heir, the closest relative, survived by his son. That's they're telling you he's the closest heir. Any questions? God bless you. All right, let's take a break. And let's be back at, take like a 10-minute, a little bit more than a 10-minute break. Be back at 9:50. 9:50. Stretch out, grab a snack, do what you got to do. Be ready to rock and roll. See you guys. Nobody wants to leave. You guys want to get started. I'm not kicking you out, but you guys want to hang out with me. I appreciate it. I'm going to run to the car real quick and grab a charging thing. Test, test, test. All right, cool.
Excuse me. You're on mute.
And I'm not sharing my screen. Okay,
There
thank
we
you
go.
for that.
Okay.
There you go. So yes, Unit 11 and 12 are important. Unit 11 is all about real estate contracts. We're starting on page 246. Line 2 confirms that on page 246. Nearly every business transaction is based on a what? On an agreement. That's what a contract is. Look at line 4. This confirms it. It says a contract is an agreement between two or more parties to do or to not do certain things, supported by some sufficient legal consideration. We'll come back to those details. If you continue down to the next paragraph, this is important for you to hear. Key to every contract is the what? Promise. Once again, the promise to do or to not do certain things. For example, in a real estate contract, the seller promises to transfer title, and the buyer promises to pay the purchase price. We understand that concept. Contract promises are enforceable by law provided the contract meets certain requirements. This is what we're going to discuss. What are those requirements? They're outlined within this unit. Preparation of contracts is what we need to hear to set the tone. Let me read this out to you. It's important. To draft the wording of legal documents, legal instruments is what we refer to them as. For others, is considered to be practicing what? Preparing legal documents is considered to be practicing what? Law. And unless you also have a law license, which is that anybody in here? Okay, we're just getting a real estate license. It's most of us. It says real estate licensees cannot prepare most legal documents, such as, this is what you're tested on, deeds, mortgages, promissory notes, most other legal documentation. And you could lose your license, regardless of whether or not you get compensated for preparing these documents. You're just not allowed to do it. That's what we see in this paragraph. Could be a third-degree felony. Unlicensed practice of law, just like unlicensed practice of real estate is a third-degree felony, consistent to what we saw in Unit 6. Go down to line 17. This paragraph, highlight this. It's important. Real estate licensees may not draw up lease agreements either. However, they can fill in the blanks on leases for residential property that are pre-approved by the Florida Supreme Court and do not exceed 1 year. For a lease term over a year requires a lawyer to prepare that document. We know, based on what we saw in Unit 7, lease agreements in the state of Florida have to comply with certain requirements. There's obligations that the landlord must meet, the tenant must meet. Do you remember those? So for that reason, we can't just draw up whatever we want. It has to comply with Florida standards, and that's why leases, residential leases, have to be pre-approved by the Florida Supreme Court. Hopefully that makes sense to you. Now, I keep on telling you all the documents you cannot prepare. Let's talk about the ones you can. And that's what we see on this list. A listing agreement. We'll come back to this, all of these. We'll break them down. But it's an employment contract with the seller to list their property, right? A buyer brokerage agreement, an employment contract with the buyer to help them purchase. Sale and purchase contract, agreement between seller and buyer for purchase and sale of real estate. And we'll come back to what an option contract is later on. I don't want to confuse you right now. Let's continue down. Actually, to the next page, page 247. Something you're going to be tested on. Essential elements of a contract. But I want you to add this. Right of any type after that. In order for contracts of any type to be considered valid, do you see valid? It has to meet these essentials. They're called the essential elements. First, you have to be dealing with what type of parties? It's in parentheses, competent. We know what competent means, of sound mind and of legal age. Something's offered and accepted by another within that agreement. We call this mutual assent, or a meeting of the minds. Has to be something legal you're doing within the agreement. Of course, that's why drug dealers don't have contracts between one another. If something goes wrong in a drug deal, you've seen these movies, you've seen these TV shows. You don't take them to court. Let's just say that. In consideration, you might recall this from a previous unit. There are two types of consideration, and I can share those with you. Once again, it's on the next page, page 248 at the top. Do you remember these two? Highlight them. If you exchange the promise to do or the promise to not do certain things in the contract for something, it could be out of either one of these two types of consideration. Valuable means you exchange for cash or something measured in terms of money. And good consideration means you exchange for love and or affection. You'll see that here. So if you have an agreement to give property to your child, what type of consideration do you think that's most likely out of? Most likely good. Unless it's my family. I'm just kidding. Statute of frauds. For real estate sale contracts, we're going to add one additional, and not just real estate sale contracts, there's others on these lists, but real estate contracts, you have to add one additional element on top of those four we already mentioned. And that's the statute of frauds requirement. This is how they describe it. It's not easy to remember a statute of frauds, but you have to know what it is. You're going to be tested on it in several different ways. It says contracts that transfer ownership rights in real property and contracts that are not to be completed within 1 year from the date created must be, here's the key. It's on line 18. Must be what? In writing and signed to be enforceable, recognized in the court of law. Being able to enforce it in the court of law if something goes wrong. That's important. Has to be in writing and signed to be able to enforce it in the court of law. If something goes wrong, be able to take them to court, sue them, hold them legally accountable for their non-performance or adverse performance, depending on the agreement. Purchase and sale contracts have to have this requirement. So you can't have a verbal purchase and sale agreement between seller and buyer. And if something goes wrong, take them to court. The courts will not recognize that verbal agreement. I'm not telling you that verbal agreements are invalid. I'm just telling you, if you try to use a verbal agreement for what we see on this list, too bad, so sad. Like option contracts, we'll come back to this. Deeds and mortgages, can't have verbal. Lease, listing, and buyer agreements for a term of longer than what? 1 year must be in writing and signed to be enforceable. So that means if the lease is 6 months, less than a year, it doesn't have to be in writing and signed to be enforceable in the court of law. You can still enforce it, even though it's verbal. It would be very difficult, you can imagine. The judge is thinking it's all he say, she say. They call it hearsay. But you could accomplish it. So once again, not invalid, but if you want to enforce these, what we see on this list has to be in writing and signed. That's the statute of frauds requirement. Statute of limitations, you probably have heard of this before, but let's focus on what's on these bullet points. This is the time limit to hold somebody legally accountable for what they agreed to in the contract. Take them to court and enforce. For written contracts, you have within what time frame? 5 years. And if it's verbal, like that lease agreement, less than a year, it's acceptable. You can enforce it, but you have within, yes, 4 years to enforce it in the court of law. And once again, it's going to be all he say, she say. All right, let's move on to page 249. And this is going to help you remember what we just got done discussing. In the shaded box, well, right here, the shaded part, elements of a valid and enforceable, and enforceable real estate sale contract. Remember this. Think of the acronym COLIC. This will help you remember. Those of you who have kids, you know what colic is. Yeah, it's when a baby is irritable, has gases, usually cries a lot as a result of this. And we just use that to help us remember. Check this out. You recognize competent parties, offer an acceptance, legal purpose, and consideration. These four are what it takes to make a contract, starts with a V, valid. But then we added one additional element to make the contract enforceable. Write down enforceable. And that was the fact that it needed to be in writing and signed or meet the statute of frauds requirement. I'm just reviewing. So what we talked about on the previous page, but simple way to help you remember. Any questions here? Okay, let's move on. Now I get to discuss with you guys contracts in general, figure 11.1. Let's go through this list. A contract is valid if it contains all of the essentials. What are the essentials? Remember the four: competent parties, offer an acceptance, legal purpose, consideration. It's void if it's missing any one of those four. For instance, if there's something illegal in the contract does not exist. It's void. It's not valid. We call it void. Voidable is interesting. I'm going to come back to this, but let me describe it to you first. It's where one party in the agreement does not have to perform, does not have to comply. They can get out if they choose. I'll come back to this and show you some examples. Enforceable means, just like it says, recognized in the court of law, hold them legally accountable for their obligations. Unenforceable means the courts will not recognize and allow it to be enforced. Remember, we talked about, imagine if you have a verbal purchase and sale contract. No, statute of frauds applies to that. It would have to be in writing and signed. So if you try to have it verbal, too bad, so sad, unenforceable. Now I get to share with you the different contract classifications or these different sets of contracts. Let's go through it together. There's one in particular you're going to be tested on, class exam question, lock that in. I'll come back to this, just highlight it for now. Okay, actually continues on to the next page. Gives you an exact example you might see. But let's move on. We're on page 251. I want you to highlight this as well. Starting on line 22, separate class exam question. Okay. What I just skipped over is summarized for us in figure 11.2. So let's focus on this specific figure. I'll go through these different sets of contracts with you guys. Very simple. Starting with formal versus informal. Formal means the contract is in what? So therefore, informal means it's not in writing. There's other names for contracts that are not in writing, such as oral, parole, verbal. By the way, parole is French as well. Parole means like in words. The next set of contracts, bilateral and unilateral. What's the difference? Well, what's the prefix of the word bilateral? Look, the prefix of the word bilateral is bi, which means, doesn't mean two, it means both. And a simple way to help you remember what a bilateral contract is, or anything with that prefix bi, and think of a bicycle. It's actually a bicycle, but we just say it quickly nowadays and we say bicycle, but it's really a bicycle, which requires the use of both wheels to operate. And it's the same thing for a bilateral contract. Both parties are obligated to perform as the contract states. But then we come across a unilateral contract. What's the prefix of the word unilateral? It's uni, which means one. Think of a unicycle. So we say unicycle, but then we say bicycle. I mean, anyhow, whatever. So requires the use of one wheel to operate. And with a unilateral contract, one party is obligated to perform, but add this to the end of it. It's while the other party may void. Oops, what just happened? While other party may void. And that's why we also refer to unilateral contracts as being voidable. Yes, voidable, because one party can get out if they choose. You're probably wondering, what's an example of this? Well, there's several examples I'm going to share with you, three in particular that you need to know for your exams. The first example, and what you're tested on for your final, is a brokerage incentive. Let's just say I'm your broker. I decide to add an incentive for the month in your sales performance. Month of January, who wants it? I'm going to give you an additional $5,000 bonus, whoever has the highest volume of sales. Whatever, I'm just making it up. Why is this classified as a unilateral contract between you and I?
If I fail to meet expectations, I'm not penalized.
Exactly. So who is obligated, the broker or the associate? It's the broker.
He has to deliver it. So you make
Exactly.
quota, you have
100%. So as an associate, if you don't perform, if you don't have the highest sales volume, you don't get the what? You're not obligated to do so. But if you are the highest performing agent, am I obligated to give you the bonus as promised? Yes. So one party is obligated, the other party is not. That's one example. A unilateral. Another example of this, write this down. Conveying property to a minor. Are you allowed to convey property to a minor? Yes, you can, because a grantee, do they have to be competent? No, the person receiving ownership does not have to be competent, nor sign the deed. So I can have an agreement to do so, but the agreement is recognized as a unilateral contract. Because who must perform, as the contract states, the adult or the minor? The adult, of course. The minor can get out if they choose, and that's why it's unilateral. It's voidable for that reason by the minor. And the last example is an option contract. An option contract. I'm pretty sure you've heard of an option contract, but you just need to hear it in a different way. Actually, write this down. Option contract is also known as, have you heard of rent to own? It's also referred to as a lease option. So lease with the option to purchase. Does that make sense? It's structured as a lease. And at the end of the lease, you have the option to purchase or walk away. That's why it's unilateral. You don't have to buy it at the end. You can walk away.
It's always.
Yes, it is. But to incentivize somebody moving forward to purchase it, what's required up front is something called an option fee. I require 5% down for my rent to own properties. You give me 5% down, we structure it as a lease. I can stretch the lease out, let's say, as long as you want. Let's say it's negotiated 3 years. That gives you 3 years to secure permanent financing to cash me out, and then ownership to be converted into your name. And at the end of the 3 years, if you don't move forward with the purchase, well, I keep that option fee. It's non-refundable. So even though you have the option to back out, you don't have to purchase, you forfeit your option fee. That's just, everything's negotiable. Well, a lot of people right now, interest rates. Interest rates are crazy. People don't qualify. Their credit needs to be repaired. They need time to do so, but they want to become a homeowner right now. So they can lock it in the property as the potential homeowner, but structured as a lease. And a portion of the rental payment will go towards the purchase price every single month. Yes, so the purchase price is negotiated up front, whatever that purchase price is. For instance, I'm doing this, well, I did offer it for a property in Castleberry. I offered it for a property in Cocoa, and I offered it for a property now. I have one coming up in Beverly Hills, Florida, which is north of Tampa. And it's a very popular thing. A lot of people are interested in this because of the fact that they have the potential to actually get the property for themselves rather than just leasing. And the rent goes in the landlord's pocket. They don't get anything in exchange for that. At least it goes towards a purchase price, and eventually, when they're ready, can become a homeowner. Yeah. And the next set of contracts, express, is when the contract is in words. If you want something to be included with the purchase of a particular property, you should get it in writing. However, even if you don't get something in writing, could you still try to fight for it? You could. And that's when you can prove it was implied through acts or conduct. It's like when you go into a restaurant, you sit down, you order a meal. You don't sign a contract between you and the owner of the restaurant that says, I'm going to pay my bill and you can prosecute me. No, but at the end of your bill, upon your enjoyment, you pay. It's implied. It's an implied agreement. So if you try to dine and ditch, or dine and dash, whatever you want to call it, run out on the bill, can they prosecute you even though there's nothing in writing? Of course. It's an implied agreement. And executory versus executed. If a contract has not been completed yet, it's called executory. So therefore, a contract that has been completed is called what?
executed. It's as simple as that. We also use this term to describe a contract that has been completely filled out and signed by both buyer and seller. A fully executed agreement. You might have heard real estate agents say that, oh, we have a fully executed contract. We're under contract, it's fully executed. So they might use it to describe it in that fashion, but let's move on. Contract negotiation. Next page, line 12. I want you to highlight this. It's at the end of line 13. In the normal sequence of forming a contract, one party begins by making a what? Yeah, this is what starts the negotiation process. And most savvy negotiators will tell you, don't throw out the first number. This is when negotiation begins. Anyhow, the person giving the offer is the offer what? Or, and the person receiving is the offer E. You're going to see a lot of ors and e's in the textbook, not Eeyores, not Winnie the Pooh, but ors and e's. I can simplify it for you. Offer or, offer E, mortgage or, mortgagee, lien or, lienee, lessor, lessee, optionor, optionee. I can go on and on. There's so many. There's a page at the end of your textbook dedicated specifically to remembering the ors and the e's. Here's a simple way to help you navigate. Think of an employer, an employee. Employer is the one giving the job, employee is the one receiving it. That's it. If you can remember that, you're in good shape. You can navigate the different ors and e's that exist. But let's talk about this negotiation process, specifically how to terminate an offer in the negotiation process. Termination in real estate is not necessarily something negative. Termination means to what? It means to end. So these are the various ways an offer is what? Ended in the negotiation process. You can end where both parties get what they want or not. Let's talk about it. And to help you remember this acronym, WILDCARD. Let's go through each one of these on this chart. Not that it has to be in this order, it's just in this order to help you remember. W stands for withdrawal by the offeror. Before the offeree has a chance to consider the offer, the person who gave it, the offeror, can take it away. That's one way an offer might be terminated. I is for insanity. I must have been insane to offer you $1 million for your beat up, rundown house. Okay. Unfortunately, insanity is one way to terminate, but you have to somehow prove insanity. Good luck with that. You have to somehow prove it. Lapse of time. This is going to be detailed in the agreement. You negotiate how long you give them to consider your offer. It's on the first page of the sale contract. If you look at a standard contract we use in our business. The first D is death. If anybody dies, you can't force somebody to complete their offer from beyond the grave. Counter offer. You make an offer on my property. I don't like it. I think it's not attractive enough. So I submit a what type of offer? Counter offer for something that's better in my eyes. What did I do to your previous offer? Terminate. Every new offer terminates the previous. You can't go backwards. So you're thinking, oh, well, wait a second. What if they change their mind and they say, no, actually, the first offer you submitted, I took a second look at it and I want to reconsider it. I think it's fair. I want to accept that. Is that okay in our business? No, you have to submit an entirely new offer. Could be the same exact terms that you originally proposed, but this is the process. That previous offer is no longer good because you already submitted a counter offer. It's gone. Now you have to submit a new offer beyond that. So to paint the picture, you make an offer on my property. I don't like it. I submit a counter offer. Your previous offer is terminated, but now you don't want to buy my property. You don't like my counter offer. You're turned off. I say, wait, no, I want to go back. I'm going to accept your original offer. Can I do that? No. But let's just say I think it's fair and you're like, okay, yeah, you want to take my original offer? That's fine. Let's do it. What would have to be done? You'd have to submit an entirely new offer with the same exact terms, but this is how it would work. Yes. No, you don't have to change it by anything. It could be the same exact original offer, but you have to submit it as a new offer for it to be considered. Acceptance will terminate because now we're no longer negotiating. We accept. Now we have a fully executed contract. Rejection, I don't have to accept. I could just say no. I don't like your offer. Here's the thing. In our business, you have to investigate. You have to discover what's really going on. If you submit an offer on behalf of your buyer and your buyer really wants it and you get rejected, you're like, what's going on here? Why don't they at least send us a counter offer so we're still in the game? It's usually one of two things. Either they accepted an offer from another agent and they didn't inform you of it, which is kind of unprofessional. They should just let you know, hey, listen, we're going with another offer that's higher. I apologize. But at least by them telling you that, it opens up a dialogue where you can say, well, wait a second, before you accept it, have you accepted yet? Well, my buyer is willing to come up. They still want to be in the race. I just think it's unprofessional. And that listing agent that doesn't even want to consider or give somebody the chance of upping their offer, they put their seller in a less attractive position. You could have a bidding war on your hands. These two buyers really want it and they can fight over it and be willing to overpay for that property. That's up to the buyers. That has nothing to do with you. Your job is to look out for your buyer and give them the best case scenario to sell their property. So, I mean, it's not their interest. I don't like it. Anyhow, destruction obviously will terminate. You make an offer on a property, it's wiped out by a hurricane, it's terminated. And then we come across termination of contracts. Termination of contracts is similar, but let's go through them. Ending a contract. The state exam, I ask you, what's the best way to end? It's your first bullet point. Starts with the letter P. It's what? Yeah, everybody gets what they wanted. Everybody performed their obligations. That's the best way to end things. But there's different ways to end. Let's go through a mutual rescission. It's not working out for you. I'm sorry, it's not working out for me either. Let's go our separate ways. It's not you, it's me. Impossibility of performance. Well, you'll see it right here. Death and also destruction make it impossible to perform. Correct? Lapse of time. You have a closing date detailed in the agreement. If it exceeds the closing date, the buyer is not ready, willing, or able to purchase, well, the agreement is terminated if they can't agree to an extension prior to the termination date, the lapse of time date, the closing date. And then we have to determine what happens with the buyer's deposit. We'll talk about that in just a second. And what we're describing is breach. Somebody breaking their promise. The buyer said, I'm ready to close by this date, but they weren't. And it's not something that's outside of their control. It was their fault. How do you resolve this? One party breaching. Let's talk about the remedies, the solutions. Go to page 255. Look at the shaded box between lines 14 and 15. What are the solutions? What are the cures if somebody breaks their promise? That's what breach means. It's the breaking of a promise. Key to every contract is the promise. The promise to do or to not do certain things. If you break that promise, it's called breach. Okay. So let's go through each one of these. The one you're tested on. Specific performance. This means taking somebody to what? To court. And look up here. A judge forces them to perform specific acts. I'll give you an example of this. The seller, they get cold feet. They decided, I don't want to sell the property anymore. I don't know what I'm doing. This is my family house. This is where I raise my kids. I'm going to have to buy a property. There's no way with interest rates and all these things. I'm going to buy a house as nice as this in an area like this. I don't want to sell. This has happened, by the way. So as a buyer, because a seller breached, you can take them to court and the judge will force them to sell it to you. Liquidated damages. This is when the injured party claims the deposit because of breach, earnest money deposit. When most likely will this occur? When the buyer breaches. If the buyer is not ready, willing, able to purchase by the closing date, they're in breach, they broke their promise, and the seller typically claims their what? The deposit for wasting their time. That's called liquidated damages to the seller. If we're talking about the deposit and the deposit only, liquidated damages is what we're describing. If the injured party wants to cancel, do we call that rescission on breach? Rescission on breach. Injured party says, listen, you broke your promise, that gave me a way out. Sayonara. And if the injured party tries to go after the other party for something more than the deposit, now we're talking about what type of damages? Compensatory. That's the difference. This is how you figure out the difference for your exam. Injured party claims the deposit only. What are we talking about? Starts with L. Liquidated. Injured party tries to claim anything more than the deposit. Now we're talking about what? Compensatory damages. Yep. Any questions here? It is possible sometimes for people to assign their agreement to another party to fulfill the obligations. We call that assignment of contract. But all parties have to sign a separate agreement. It starts with an N. It's on line 25 and 26. Highlight this. It's an ovation agreement. It substitutes a new party for the original. You've always got an opinion online, man. Anyhow. Go to page 256. Contracts important to real estate. Let's go through each one of these. The first thing we see is a listing contract. You see it? We know what this is. It's an employment contract with a seller to list their property, put it on the market, look for prospective buyers. What do you need to know? Highlight these bullet points. By the way, you have to have a written and signed listing contract before you can place it in the MLS. But that's not like a Florida law requirement. That's a realtor requirement because they control the MLS, right? You have to have a definite expiration date for your listing. You can't have an open end or automatic renewal clause. Look, the listing may not have an automatic renewal clause. Could be fined, citation. Can't say, okay, well, I was unable to find a buyer in 6 months. It automatically renews for another 6 months. No, you'd have to get them to sign an entirely new contract. This is how it works. There's different types of listings. Let's go through them. You might have not heard of the fact that there's other types of listings that could be used, but as a real estate professional and understanding Florida law, here they are. The first one you don't like, it's the one you're tested on. It's open to any agency. Whoever finds a buyer first earns the commission. We don't like it because we want exclusivity, don't we? And that's what we strive for. That's what we push for. And if you go to the next page, you'll see that. Page 257, we see an exclusive agreement. It's called exclusive agency, but it's unique. It's a unique type of exclusive agreement. Yes, you're the only brokerage company that can list the property. However, look right here. This is what you're tested on. The seller reserves the right to try to find a buyer on their own without paying a what? Without paying a commission. If they have a relative that comes down from one of those northern states, wants to buy their property, they don't have to pay you a commission. They found the buyer. And that's why most likely we won't use this agreement either, because it leaves that door open. I have used it though strategically, because you'll come across sellers that just refuse to sign any contract with you. Oh, you can market my property for me. You could look for a buyer and bring me a buyer, but I'm not going to sign an exclusive agreement with you. But I'm going to make sure that they sign an exclusive agreement. I'm not going to waste my time. And I'm definitely not going to use an open listing unless it's a $10 million home plus. I'll take the risk. And hey, why not? Try to market it, look for a buyer. If I just so happen to find a buyer before any of the other agents, I get a commission and it's worth my while. But besides that, how do you handle that person that won't refuse to sign? And you've come across these people. Maybe your parents were like this. Hopefully you're not like this because you have to convince people to sign. It's your job to do so. You say, hey, listen, let's do the exclusive agency listing. Because I think, first of all, I think that we're having this meeting today because you view me as a professional. You're giving me the time of the day because you think I'm capable of finding you a buyer. But our brokerage company, we use exclusive agreements. I'm sorry. And you have to sign. But let's use the exclusive agency. which still gives you the right to look for a buyer. I think that's what you're worried about, like being trapped with me, and you think you could do a better job. So go ahead, market the property if you want, and I'll do the same. And whoever finds a buyer first, basically you retain the commission, or you pay me a commission if I bring a buyer before you. It gives them that challenge, the illusion of that control, but really they don't have enough tools to market the property the way you're going to market the property and get the type of exposure on Zillow, Trulia, or Realtor.com. You're going to find a buyer before them. Okay. So you get the listing, you get the exclusive listing, you give them the illusion of control, and you put yourself in the best position to still make a commission. But the type of listing you're always going to use, I can almost guarantee it, and your brokerage company will tell you most likely to use this, is the exclusive right to sell listing agreement. You see that here? It gives the agency the exclusive right to sell. I highlighted some parentheses. That means it has the greatest degree of protection for the brokerage. Do you see that? Greatest degree of protection? And if you look on line 19, the broker therefore is assured a commission regardless of who sells the property. If the seller finds a buyer before you, it doesn't matter. You still earn a commission, and you're thinking, okay, well, that might not be right. Your job does not end when a buyer is found. I hate to break it to you. You still got paperwork, you still got to negotiate, you still got to coordinate with lenders and closing company, all this stuff, and make sure it's on track to actually close by the scheduled closing date. You got to navigate that and help people navigate that, and that requires effort. You should be entitled to a commission. But then we come across a net listing, which is rare. I can almost guarantee you're not going to use it. In most states, the reason why is in most states it's illegal. Most states you're not allowed to use a net listing. This is how it works. Look up here. The seller tells you, I have to sell my property for at least X amount of dollars by X date. If you can sell it for over X amount, you keep the rest. You can see how this leaves room for unethical behavior on the licensee's part. They're thinking, okay, really? So you list it for that amount, knowing it's worth more or could sell for more, or whatever the case may be, but you kept your mouth shut. It's just, I don't like that. I don't like that activity. And sometimes, probably the only time you come across this is when the seller tells you. And I've had a number of occasions where the seller has come to me and say, hey, listen, I'm going to be in financial ruin if I don't sell it by this date for at least X amount of dollars. If you can sell it for more, go ahead. Okay, you can keep it. I don't care. I need to sell it for at least. I'll still use the exclusive right to sell listing. Because when you close on that property, you think your commissions are hidden? You think they're not going to know how much they're paying you in commission? It's on the closing documents. They call it a closing disclosure. All the closing expenses are broken down, including how much commission you earned. So imagine you made an additional $25,000 bonus off of their property. And they're thinking, oh my gosh, why on earth did I agree to this? I could use that 25 grand. I know how to spend that money. Why did I agree to this? They knew. They knew my property was going to sell for more, and they agreed to it anyway. You think that person is going to refer any business to you? No. Hell to the no. They're thinking, how conniving. They're unethical. I'm not going to refer them any more business. They knew what they were doing. It's just, it doesn't lead to good reputation. Stay away from it.
Michael, quick question.
Now, there's a way. Look, Florida, check this out on line 29. Net listings in Florida are legal. You're allowed to use them in Florida. We don't care, apparently, in Florida. We just say go out and sell something.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, just quick question on this.
Yes.
In our area, this is like what wholesalers do. We don't, is that similar to like in Florida? Like what a wholesaler would do, put it under contract and then try to sell higher?
No, that's a little bit different.
It's different. Okay. Just
Yeah,
trying
it's
to
different.
understand.
We don't really talk about wholesaling too much, but wholesaling is an assignment of a contract. So they
Okay.
lock down the contract for a lower amount, less than market value, as if they're the buyer, but then they market the property to another investor who's willing to pay more. And they assign the contract and they charge an assignment fee. If I become a Florida real estate commissioner, I'm going to end all of that. Because I think I don't like that aspect of the business. I've gotten several deals myself through wholesalers. And I think there's room for that activity, but they need to be licensed. And if they're operating without a license, I just think it leaves too much room for unethical behavior and for them to break the law, which I've seen them do on a number of occasions. Let's continue on. There's a way to determine what to list the property for if the seller says, I need to net at least X amount of dollars when we sell it. So you could do your numbers, the math backwards. Not that you need to know this for exam purposes, but that's the math. So if the seller says, I need to make at least $50,000 when we sell it, then you can figure out what to sell it for based on that. What's their debt obligation? How much profit do they want to make? What's the closing cost? Stuff like that. Go to page 258. A buyer representation agreement. This is required now. Before, if you're going to be a realtor, it's required. And most people, if you're going to be working residential, you're going to be working with buyers, you're going to be a realtor, you're going to join the membership. If your broker has a membership, you have to have the membership. It's not free, it's not cheap. But let's talk about broker's compensation. It says it's detailed in the agreement you have with your employer. Any questions about this? Didn't we talk about this in a previous unit? Yeah, the listing agreement will outline how much compensation you're going to charge the seller. And how it used to be was you get the seller to agree to pay not only the listing agent, but also the buyer side of the transaction. That has since changed, at least with the contracts. Doesn't mean that you can't get the seller to pay the other side, but it's just you can't advertise it. You can't put it in the MLS. Before, you could put it in MLS. And the problem with that is this, and I agree that it shouldn't be advertised. Before, if you went into the MLS and you saw a property that was listed for sale, you could scroll all the way down to the bottom and you'll see how much commission the seller is willing to pay the buyer's agent. So if you're working with a buyer, you're looking on this listing, you see, oh, they're willing to pay 3%. This is a property my buyer might like. Oh, but this other one, they would like as well, probably better, but they're only willing to pay 2%. Let's go with this one. Do you see how that, it just leaves that room for unethical? You're not supposed to do that, but that's what they try to eliminate. You have to call in and ask if the seller is willing to give some compensation concessions. That's how you ask them. Is the seller willing to give any concessions for compensation? And you let them describe that to you. All right, when do you get paid your commission? As we see in this next paragraph. Typically when you what? When you close on the property. That's called effect a sale. You see this on line 34? It's italicized. It means in the effect of a sale is when you get paid your commission. That's most common. But you could stipulate that you're hired just to find a purchaser, and that's it. So as soon as a buyer signs the sale contract, you earn your commission at that point. Doesn't even have to close. It's not common for you to do this, but sometimes you might be hired to market the property, and that's it. Advertising fee. Let's move on. Who earns the commission? We already know this. Broker. The broker says may wish to split compensation with cooperating broker. But really, this should be modified. The rules have changed. I mean, well, that's a realtor rule. It's not state law. State law is different. So it is consistent, excuse me. I'm trying to prepare you for what's going to happen in real life. Most people are going to become a realtor, and you have to conform to the realtor rules if you get that membership. So I already described it to you. Let's move on. Who's doing all the work, the broker or the associate? Yeah. And then who pays the associate commission? Broker. Cannot be paid directly by the seller or the buyer. Didn't we already discuss that? So what if they're so pleased with your performance, they want to give you a bonus? Can you accept that bonus?
They raise the broker.
Yes, but direct them to sign it over to the brokerage, not to you personally. And then the broker is entitled to get in your split or give you all the bonus if that's the agreement. Be careful of these brokerages that do this 100% commission plan or compensation plan. So here's the thing. It's a popular concept because they hook people with that. Oh, make 100% commission on your deals. But what they're doing is they're charging you a monthly fee, and then they're charging you a transaction fee. The monthly fee might be $200. So every month you're paying $200 until you actually complete a sale. They're getting their money. And then when you close, they get a fee. Transaction fee is how they describe it. Buyers are listing agents and buyer agents, so they don't have to pay that transaction fee. They'll charge it to their client. I don't like that. It's not a classy thing because, for instance, the seller is already going to pay commission, and on top of that, they see a transaction fee from the brokerage. I mean, it's just not classy. I don't like it. However, there could be benefits to the brokerage company that does this. Maybe that $200 you pay a month gives you access to all this technology, the CRM, all the tools that they have, leads, and so forth. It could be justified, but you have to do the research. What's the 3 most important things before you start working for a brokerage company? Hang your license with them: training, commission, and leads. So what's your training look like? What's your commission structure? And do you provide leads? Not every brokerage company provides leads. Almost all don't. You have to lead generate yourself. And they say, oh, we'll teach you how to generate leads. But actually having leads that the brokerage company provides to you, it just adds a different element to your business. Otherwise, you might have to pay for it. I've paid for Zillow leads, paid thousands per month for Zillow leads. And I was able to make my money back, and on top of that, make more. But anyhow, I'm on the investment side of the business versus the brokerage. I tried that, and it was fun, having dozens of agents and all this stuff, and it's a lot of responsibility. But I prefer to teach, and then when you delegate, you could lose something in the process. If the person, not everybody can be a leader. It's a special person, and then to keep them there, it's another thing. Anyhow, politics. Go to page 259. When do you get paid your commission? You said at the closing, but do you actually receive your money at the closing, or do you have to wait a certain number of days for things to clear before? No, you get paid at the closing. You do. You get paid at the closing. And it could be in the form of a check. It's not efficient if you get a check. Listen, here's the thing. The brokerage company, the one that your license is with, they let the closing company know, the title company, for instance, hey, have a portion, have the percentage of commission that's supposed to go to the sales associate. It's an 80-20 split. They get 80%. Have the 80% of the commission waiting for them on the closing table so you can just go and pick up a check. But with the title company, I'll have them wire the money, right? It goes directly in your bank account, same day, rather than getting a check, scanning the check, depositing the check, waiting a day or two for it to clear and so forth. It's just more efficient for them to wire. But you have to provide instructions to the closing agent. It says the broker has given specific written instructions to the title company of the amount of commission to be paid to the associate for their share of commission. Let's move on. We're almost at a break, okay? We're actually almost done with this unit. You can fight for commission even though you weren't able to get that property sold based on the time period that was allocated to you in the listing contract. Let's just say you have a 3-month listing contract. In 3 months, you got to find a buyer that signs a contract willing to close on that property for you to earn a commission, but you are unable to do so. And the seller doesn't want to renew with you. They don't want to sign a new listing contract. But you found out later on that seller went back to one of the buyers you introduced them to, or they came to an open house. You have the sign-in sheet with their signature. You have evidence. Are you still entitled to a commission? Yes, you are. It's through procuring cause. That's how we describe it. Highlight this. It means you can prove that you've started the chain of events that resulted in a sale of that property. If you can somehow prove that that's a buyer that you attracted to that property, lured to that property, you can fight for a commission. You're probably wondering, how do you find this out? Where do you get this information? It's all public records. You know who buys the price. It's like when you break up with somebody and you're still friends with them on social media.
Next day, another story.
Or you have a friend that's a friend with them on social media. You can find out what's going on with your ex, is what I'm saying. You can find out who they're dating, the other real estate agent that they hired to get the job done because they didn't think you were doing a good job. And you can see if the property sold and who the property sold to. It's all public records. Yes, question.
They'll associate and still your buyers? Or-
Not exactly. Sellers, what they do is they try to do deals. Yeah, they try to kick you out of the deal. Let's just say they had a conversation with their neighbor, and the neighbor is like, "Oh yeah, I'm really interested in buying your property." Oh, yeah. They say, "Hey, listen, can we do the deal like just you and me?" Say, "I'm under contract with the listing agent, but my listing contract's going to expire in about a month. So just wait a month. If I don't find a buyer, I'll come to you and we'll work out a deal." So they're trying to navigate around the real estate agent, trying to get the deal without the agent knowing. But that buyer probably didn't even know that that property was available for sale until you put that for sale sign in the front yard, until you advertise it on Zillow, Trulia, and Realtor.com. Anyhow, you can try to fight for it, but you have to prove it. Good question. We already talked about option contracts. Go to the bottom of page 260, and we see sale and purchase contracts starting on line 28. Without even looking at, I want you to highlight this, but without even looking at this list, information contained in a sale contract. You could probably tell me everything that appears in a sale contract. It's just common sense. The names of the parties, the vendor and the vendee, that's the seller and the buyer, the dates, the signatures, the address of the property, all the terms, clauses, conditions, what you exchange the property for, purchase price. I mean, it's self-explanatory. Look at this list. Okay, let's move on. We talked about this in a previous unit. It's going to be confirmed for us once again. Spouse's signatures. You have to get your spouse to sign the sale contracts and even to list the property, the listing contract. Why? Do you remember we talked about this? Yeah, because the spouse might have a right to that property. If it's been homesteaded, you remember, claimed as your primary residence, it prevents the spouse from selling it from under their spouse's nose. So they have to sign. We see it again. Unless you have this document that allows you to handle legal matters on the other person's behalf, it's called the what document? Power of attorney, POA. Have you ever heard of power of attorney? Have you ever used a power of attorney before? Okay, a few of us, cool. The POA allows you to assign somebody as an attorney in fact. You highlight this. Attorney in fact doesn't mean they have to be a lawyer. Attorney means a form of representation. It just means you're giving a third-party person authority to handle legal matters on your behalf. I've used this for foreign buyers and sellers. They're out of the country. They want me to complete the deal on their behalf. They give me that type of trust, and you have to use a power of attorney document to accomplish that. If you use power of attorney for a real estate transaction, it has to be recorded in a public records. You can't just have it written, notarized, and hold on to it or put it in a safe or a shoebox, doesn't matter. It has to be recorded in a public records. There's two types of power of attorney documents. Highlight these. The general allows the attorney, in fact, to handle all matters on your behalf. That's a scary thought. You're pretty much giving them legal permission to be you. You'll see that, line 44, all matters. So I'll be careful with that. And then the special power of attorney limits the attorney, in fact, to one specific matter on your behalf, one legal matter. Maybe just signing a contract on your behalf, and that's it. It's going to be detailed. And you'll see that continues on to the next page. Okay. Let's continue to page 262. Last subject of this unit, then we'll take a break. Sound good? Contract disclosures. I'll be brief here. We talked about this in Unit 4. Do you remember in Unit 4, material defects disclosure? If you know anything about the property that can materially affect the value, a physical problem with the property, doesn't matter how small, if it's hidden and the buyer cannot see it for themselves, must you disclose?
Yes.
What about illegal activity associated with the property? No. What about death associated with the property? No. And some people get confused with this. You can sell a property as is, but you still have to disclose. That's the problem in our business. People think, oh, you're selling it as is, so the seller doesn't have to disclose anything. Yes, they do. It just means they're not going to fix it. You're buying it in its current condition, but they still must disclose. Okay. Let's move on. Radon gas. Radon gas, yes, in the shaded box. If you're not familiar with what radon gas is, it's odorless and tasteless, naturally occurring radioactive gas. It's light, lighter than air, seeps through cracks in foundation, can end up in any room in a home. But here in Florida, it's not common. Up north, if you have a radon gas problem, then it could build up in a basement. And that's why you have these devices you can put in your home to detect radon gas. Most people don't worry about it here in Florida, but it is a hazard and it's something that has to be disclosed. Oh, somebody's trying to show a property. Has to be disclosed in the sale contract. There's a section of the sale contract. This is according to this 404 of the Florida statutes requires this. Let's move on. Lead-based paint disclosure, page 264. LBP disclosure. If you're selling a home that was constructed prior to 19 what? Yeah, 1978. There's a chance that it might have lead-based paint. It's a low chance, but what is lead-based paint? It's paint that has lead in it. Why did they used to paint homes with lead in the paint? Well, it lasted longer. It adhered better to whatever you painted it on. And also, they were trying to protect homes from radiation. Lead keeps radiation out, including the signals that are passing through our body right now that we can't see, that governments use to keep track of us. So by removing lead and paint, they have access to bombard your house with certain signals, and I won't say spy, but it's kind of what it is. That's a conspiracy theory side of it. That's not, like widely known. That's something that you got to dig into Reddit for. Anyhow, the problem with lead is that it's poisonous. If you ingest it or inhale it, it travels through the bloodstream, ends up in the brain, and causes very serious health risks. Lead poisoning, if you've heard of that before. That's why they removed lead from pencils, because kids were stabbing, eating it, all kinds of stuff. You were one of those kids. I'm just kidding. Do you have a question? No? Now it's graphite in pencils. But what do you need to know? If you're selling a home prior to 1978 or renting, you have to provide the LBP disclosure. They also talk about a pamphlet. I don't know where that is. Where is the pamphlet? Right here, EPA pamphlet. And you give them a certain time period to inspect for lead-based paint, but it's not something that you got to worry about. Energy efficient homes, you have to provide a disclosure if the home qualifies for these benefits that are part of energy efficiency. We're talking about foam insulation, good insulation in the ceiling and the walls, energy efficient water heater, appliances, AC unit, high SEER rating, solar panels. All of these things contribute towards being classified as an energy efficient home. And there's ratings that inspectors can do to determine this, and it qualifies for special loans. And that's why a buyer needs to know beforehand. That's why it has to be disclosed to them. If you're selling a home that's energy efficient, you have to let the buyer know. HOA disclosure, one of the most important disclosures. If you're selling a home that's part of a community that's governed by an HOA, it has restrictive covenants, if you remember that. A buyer has to know what the rules are, who the HOA is, how to get in contact with them, how much they're charging, and how often they're charging. You know that could be a deal breaker for somebody. Imagine if the HOA dues are $500 a month for a single family house. You're like, gosh, $500 a month for this community. Like what's going on here? I've seen higher than that, but it really depends. So it has to be disclosed. What are the rules? How much are they charging? How often are they charging? And if you go to page 265, chapter 720 of the Florida statutes, requires the seller of the property, subject to mandatory HOA disclosure, provide the buyers with a disclosure summary regarding the association, the existence of restrictive covenants, and the assessments that the association is imposing, and so forth. It says the seller, but as a real estate professional, you're also bound by providing, even though on your class exam, it says the seller is required, not the real estate agent. Your duty is to present. The seller tells you, and then you present. Because you're listing it, right? You put in the MLS, and then you have to attach the HOA details. And the reason why it's so serious is because of this, on these bullet points. The buyer should not sign before reviewing the HOA summary. And if the HOA disclosure was not given to them before they sign the sale contract, they have the right to void the contract all the way to the closing date. You'll see it here, right to terminate at closing. Yikes. All right, property tax disclosure. You can tell them what the current bill is. If the current bill is posted, property tax bill, and that's posted by the county. But don't be a psychic. You're not, okay? Don't try to predict what they're going to pay next year in property taxes, because they might pay more or less, depending on what exemptions they might qualify for or not qualify for. Code violation disclosure. You can sell a home as is with a code violation. You can. You'll see right here. This, what do you need to know? It's right here. Once you sell the property, the seller must forward to the code enforcement agency the name and address of the new homeowner, whoever bought their property, with a copy of the disclosure given to the buyer within how many days of title transfer. Yeah. But this is why you pay for a title search, to reveal any code violations. It's going to show up. It's in public records. It's recorded. And then you address it. Even if you're getting a loan, you can buy the property with an existing code violation and it gets settled at the closing. But all parties must have knowledge of it. Let's move on. Have you ever heard of a CDD? Community Development District. How does it work? CDD pays for infrastructure. Let me see if I can find it right here. You'll see online. It's all about infrastructure. Let me explain to you. If you pay attention up here, I'll make it simple for you. When you develop a subdivision of homes, 500 homes, there's impact fees that you have to pay as a developer. I don't know if you're familiar with impact fees. The county can handle a certain number of homes on their grid for electricity. The city or county, municipality, can handle a certain number of homes on their water system. But now you want to build 500 more homes. How can the system handle that? That's why they charge these developers impact fees, because they use that money to increase infrastructure to accommodate for these additional homes. But the developer, it might not be within their budget to pay for these fees. It might make it too expensive to construct new homes. So what they do is they transfer those expenses onto the homeowner that wants to purchase a house within that subdivision. It's through a CDD. If you ever purchase a property with a CDD, it has to be disclosed to you. That's the whole point of this, disclosure. And you have to know how much the CDD is on an annual basis. It's added on to your property taxes. When you buy a property in a community that has a CDD, it doesn't last forever. It just lasts long enough to offset what it costs for those impact fees when they develop that subdivision. But it might last 20, 25 years. Eventually it goes away, but it might be that long. In California, they call it Mello-Roos because the person who developed this concept is Mello-Roos. So rather than paying for it out of their pocket, they charge the homeowner who wants to live in that community over a certain time period.
On the taxes?
Yes. Added onto their property tax bill. If you purchase a property in a community which a CDD is imposed, you'll see it. I helped somebody purchase a townhouse in St. Cloud. And they were paying $1,800 additional every single year for CDD. $1,800. I mean, it's almost $2,000 a year just because the developer is greedy and they didn't want to pay for those expenses up front. So that's why some people run away from properties that a CDD is imposed. And our last subject of this unit, yes, our last subject is misrepresentation and fraud. There's a subtle difference between these two. Misrepresentation is when you left something out to make it completely truthful. They give you good examples here. Or you exaggerate. You see this on line 15. You boast. You make the property sound better than it actually is. It's the best view in the entire neighborhood right here. It's an opinion. And you see these descriptions of properties that are listed for sale. These real estate agents make the property sound amazing. Oh, cozy little house. You know, it's like, they don't say little, they say cozy house.
It's the difference between that and puffery.
It's the same thing.
Exactly.
Puffering or puffery. It's a legal term to describe the exaggeration, making it sound better than it is. It's prohibited in our business, and it's a form of misrepresentation, which means you didn't necessarily lie. You twisted the truth or left something out to make it completely truthful. And it could lead to what? Fraud. Fraud is straight out lying. And that's what we see next. To prove that a licensee committed fraud, you have to establish at least one of these four things. Let's go through them. Number one, you can prove that the licensee lied. You see that? Number one, prove that the licensee lied. Could be difficult or easy depending on the circumstance. Number two, you might have to prove that the licensee knew it was a lie when they said it. Is that easier or harder to prove? You have to basically get them to admit that they lied. Number three, you might have to prove that the party depended on the information that was lied about. That's easy. You just say, I relied on it to make an informed decision in buying this property. And lastly, financial loss was caused because of the lie. Write that down. Write this down specifically. This is one of the most important. Why? If nobody lost any money, was anybody truly hurt? So write that down. If there's no loss, if nobody can prove the loss of something financial, some monetary loss, it's not fraud. No loss, no fraud. Have to prove some type of financial loss to establish fraud. And lastly, we see fraudulent activity. Fraudulent is like quasi-fraud, quasi. What does quasi mean? Quasi-fraud, exactly. It's kind of, sort of, almost. What is quasi-fraud or fraudulent? There are several activities that are prohibited. Let's go through each one. They're deceptive in nature. We'll actually talk about this in Unit 12. When you're selling a property within a blanket mortgage, you have to disclose this to the prospective buyer. If you don't, it's fraudulent activity. We'll explain why in Unit 12. Just highlight it for now, which is today. Next is telling somebody, hey, listen, when you buy this property, if you don't like it, come find me and I'll buy it back from you. Don't do that. Don't use that weird and I don't like it. It's a sales tactic. Oh, I'm selling you something so good. I know you'll love it. And if you don't like it, come find me. I'll buy it back from you. Don't do that. And lastly, no tricks, no lotteries, no schemes, no raffles, no puzzles to win real estate. Sounds like a great idea. Host a raffle in your front yard. Put a sign up. Raffle tickets, $500. If your name is picked at the end of the month, you win my property free and clear. It sounds like a great idea. You just can't do it in the state of Florida. It's fraudulent activity. It's a form of quasi-fraud. Questions here? No questions? Okay. Let's take a break. And when we come back, we're going to work on Unit 12. It's 11:03. Let's just round up to 11:05. Be back at 11:20. 11:20. Where's Bob? Not here today.
He's not feeling good. We're all got
Okay.
sick up here.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Hi, my name is Crystal Rivera, and I'm a realtor with Live Realty at Nona. I decided to be a real estate agent for my love of helping others, thinking about helping them with their first home, with their first apartment, with their first investment property. Flipping homes is what started me in the business. My husband is into flipping homes, so I went from nursing, which I'm still currently doing, but now going into real estate. Decided to use Cameron Academy because of my nursing schedule and how their schedule works well with my schedule. Did not expect to be prepared as I was. Michael was amazing. He prepared me in 2 weeks to take the test, literally 5 days after I completed the class. And 3 days after that, I was already signed with Live Realty. And here we are 5 weeks later, and I have my first listing. So definitely prepared me well for the real estate industry and just all that's to come. I'm excited, and I wish everybody luck.
Hey, my name's Jonathan Gibson. I am from Orlando, Florida. I had started my career in real estate based on wanting to... I started out my journey in real estate with Cameron Academy because I read a lot of online reviews, and there were exceptional reviews about Cameron. When I got here, I wasn't disappointed at all. I realized Michael was the best teacher, and he helped me learn everything I needed to know about real estate. And he's a very good instructor. He's thorough. He tells everything. He's one of the better professors. He's good at explaining stuff, helping you get through this and making it easy for everything. And I wanted to do real estate because I read some books and I bought homes, and I wanted to start renting out my property. And I know we had, based on my research online from Google and everything, I knew I had to do a school for Florida and do the 63-hour course. And I looked it up, came to Cameron Academy. It's been the best thing ever. He's helped us with connections. He's brought in different realtors and brokers, plus find work after the academy. So if you're wanting to learn anything about real estate, I would definitely recommend Cameron Academy.
Hi, my name is Tamara Fletcher, and I have experience in education. I've worked in education for over 17 years, but I always wanted to get into real estate. I wanted to get into real estate because I love a couple of things. I love people, I love making money, and I love being able to sell homes, or at least the potential of selling homes. I love real estate. That's what brought me to Cameron Academy. Cameron Academy has done so much for me. I have learned so much from Michael. The information that I've gained here has made me feel so prepared for the state exam as well as the exam at the end of the course. I can't go on enough about how enthusiastic Michael was during the whole process of learning, and how that really made a difference in the way that I learn. Being able to be here in person and take the in-person classes is what has really made it all the difference in the world. Michael is a great instructor. I saw great reviews about him and his instruction here at Cameron Academy. And I am really happy to say that all of those positive reviews are true, 1,000%. It's made a world of difference for me. And if I could do it again, I would.
My name is Gabriel Minyarji. I've been in the restaurant industry for the past 25 years, now getting the residential investment opportunity. I found Cameron Academy to be very helpful in my new endeavor. Michael Cameron has been very, very helpful, knowledgeable, provided very new and efficient information to help me endeavor my career. I'm very, very pleased and satisfied that I found Cameron Academy and the knowledge that I gained from them, and for all my future endeavors. I highly, highly, highly recommend them. I definitely give them a 5-star plus.
My name is Dennis Duen. I came to the Cameron Academy. My mentor, he also he told me go directly to Cameron Academy. They are very, very good, and that's how he got his license. And he advised me to go to that school. And when I came, so far, it was the best decision that I made. The instructor Michael was very, very good. He's very good, and it would benefit me. Very knowledgeable. I want to say thank you to him. And I think I will pass because of him. I will pass both school exam and the state exam. So it was the best decision that I made. Michael was very good, and I want to say thank you to him. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Samuel Ramirez. I'm an electrician. I got into real estate to get into my own deals and to see if I can sell some real estate for commission on the sides. Cameron Academy taught me a lot of things. It taught me different things that I didn't know about real estate. It cleared up some misconceptions that I had. Michael was a great teacher. He taught me a lot about real estate that I didn't know, and it just opened my eyes a lot more and made me just very motivated to get into this. And I think anyone should go to Cameron Academy.
Mi nombre es Rolly Peralta y acabo de terminar las clases aquí en la Academia Cameron con el profesor Michael. He aprendido mucho y estoy muy agradecido con Michael por todo lo que me ha enseñado. Yo quiero ser un real estate agent para seguir invirtiendo en el futuro y también ayudar a algunas familias a adquirir sus sueños. Estoy muy agradecido con Michael y invito a todas las personas a venir a esta academia.
大家好，我叫 Rudy，我很开心能够跟 Michael 上学，因为他在real estate 这方面学到了给我很多知识，我也很开心能够选到他，因为不是每个人都可以教你，他能够教你的东西，他有很多的实力，有很多的经验，而且很风趣，所以对于我来讲是一件非常幸运的事情。那我个人想做房地产投资，所以我必须要有最专业的知识去帮助我自己。很幸运的能够选到 Michael， 所以我希望大家以后能够给他一个机会去跟他做投资，不会让你丢钱，这个很重要。所以祝你们好运，希望能以后见到你们，谢谢，拜拜。
Well said. Let's get started. Unit 12. Let's jump into it. We see it's an introduction to financing residential mortgages. We know how important financing is to our business. Close to 90% of buyers have to secure financing to acquire the property. So we need to know what goes into financing so we can guide our buyers that so desperately need it. The housing market crisis in 2008 was caused because of financing. No lenders were willing to give loans. And therefore, since 90% of buyers need it, houses didn't sell and it caused a collapse. We're going to learn more about that in Unit 13, but this is a good introduction to financing so we can understand the components and what goes into it, starting with loan instruments. There are two loan instruments in particular we have to know about. We see the mortgage and the what? The mortgage and the promissory note, not to be confused with certain things you might be familiar with upon first glance, but I'll share with you the details of it. A mortgage is not the money that you get from the bank to purchase the property. That's the misconception that most people have. Most people think that the mortgage is the loan. It's not. If I can share with you what it actually is, and you're going to be tested on this, it's the paperwork the borrower signs, specifically utilized to pledge the property as collateral for the debt. They say security for the loan. It's what makes it a secured loan. It's secured by collateral because they pledge this collateral. In this case, it would be the home, the property that they're getting the money for, which stipulates if I break my promise, the lender can take that from me. Car loans are secured loans because they're secured by collateral. If you stop paying on your car loan, what do? They repossess. Exactly. It's similar in that way, but there's a term used to describe the action of the buyer pledging the property as collateral. It's called what? It's called hypothecation. To hypothecate means to pledge. And that's what you're doing with the mortgage documents. Specifically, what the mortgage documents are utilized for. Now you understand, the mortgage is not the loan. It's not the money. If I said mortgage loan as a complete title, then yes, I'm talking about the money. But if it's just the mortgage, it's the paperwork. Who are the parties to the mortgage? Well, it's the mortgagor and the mortgagee. And you'll see an understanding of the difference between these two parties below in this chart. If you have or at the end of the name, it means that person is doing what? Giving or receiving? Giving. If you have e at the end, it means that person is what? So who's the mortgagor, the borrower or the lender? That's the misconception. Once again, most people, exactly, most people, they get confused with who the mortgagor is, most test takers, because they see or, they're thinking that person's giving something, and they're thinking it's the lender because of the connection with money. It's the loan. No. Who is giving the promise or the pledge of collateral? Who's giving the promise to repay the debt? It's the borrower. You'll see that here. The mortgagor gives the mortgage as collateral along with a note as a promise to repay the lender. To help you remember, I want you to write this down.
The lender would be the bank.
The mortgage or is the borrower, I'm misspelling, who's always poor.
That's grim.
Do you get it?
Very grim, but yeah.
The mortgagor is the borrower who's always poor. And therefore, the mortgage has the money. You got it. And I'm misspelling it for a reason, but it's going to help you remember. Any questions about this? Okay, let's continue on. If you go to the next page, page 277, let me share something with you. Look at the end of line 11, continues on line 12. The promissory note, which we're going to talk about right now, and the mortgage go hand in hand with one another. You can't have one without the other. Must accompany all mortgages in Florida, so you understand how important it is before we describe what it is. The promissory note, the name itself should give away as to what its purpose is. It's a legal document that the borrower signs as a promise to repay the debt. And you'll see on line 4, it makes the borrower personally liable for that financial obligation. Think of it as a legal IOU. Have you ever heard of an IOU before? People write on a piece of paper IOU and they write down a certain amount of money. So it's a legal form or a version of that. But there's more details. Not just the promise that you're going to pay a certain amount, but for what? How often are you going to repay the debt back? At what interest rate? And what happens if you break your promise? We'll see that next. Highlight the bullet points. This is the features of the promissory note. The amount, the interest rate, repayment method, term, time period to repay the debt, and what happens if you stop paying. We call that default. Any questions here? We already discussed this in Unit 9, mortgage lien priority, so we can move on to the next page, page 278. Class exam question, highlight this. Satisfaction of what? It's just like it sounds. You're satisfying your debt, essentially is what it means. Satisfaction of mortgage, when you pay off your debt completely, it requires the lender to record this document into public records. Satisfaction, which will essentially release what that's been attached to the property. Specifically the mortgage what on line 32, the mortgage lien, and they have within how much time to take care of it. Look on line 30, 60 days, within 60 days. You satisfy your debt, they must record satisfaction in the public records and remove the mortgage lien that's attached to your property. Because if you remember, when you got the loan from the lender, you allowed them voluntary lien. You remember this? You allowed them to put a mortgage lien against your property until the debt is satisfied. So once you satisfy, they remove it. And they have to do it within 60 days. Go to page 279. We see 2 theories of mortgage law. Let's go through each one. You're going to be tested on one of them. God bless you. Most states, including Florida, are considered to be a lien theory state. But what does that actually mean? If I can get your attention, what it means is, depending on what state you live in, and the theory that they subscribe to, we have 2 theories, lien or title theory, will dictate who holds on to your deed while you're paying off your debt. Luckily, here in Florida and most states, we believe in lien theory. When you close on the property, the deed is signed over to you. It's recorded in the public records. But you allow the lender to place what against your property until you pay it off. That's why we're considered to be a lien theory state. The name gives it away.
Funny, I was just about to ask what theory we were.
Yes, we're a lien theory state. Most states are. There's very few states that subscribe to title theory. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is Pennsylvania one of those that subscribe to title theory? You have to pay off the debt completely until the deed is signed over to you?
No, we're lien theory too.
Okay, lien theory. Perfect.
Yeah.
Like 99% sure. New York's the type.
Yeah, so until you pay off the debt, that deed is not transferred to you, but once you satisfy, then they sign it over to you, recorded in the public records. You can imagine it's much easier to foreclose on somebody who stopped paying in the title theory state because you already have the deed as a lender. You basically just have to evict them out of the property. But here in Florida, there's a process you have to go through, a legal action. We'll talk about that at the end of the unit. If somebody defaults, what's that process look like? Let's move on to what I just skipped over is on page 281. What I just skipped over is on page 281. It's summarized for us. Focus on this chart. This just makes it easy. These are the details you need to know. Within your mortgage, this paperwork, these legal documents you sign to pledge your property as collateral for the debt, it also has specific provisions, clauses that could be contained within or not, depending on what's negotiated, or the lender and their preference. But you need to know what they are to determine if you want to fight for them or to exclude them. Most people don't know and they just sign blindly, not understanding what impact these could have. So let's go through each one. The first one, you're going to be tested on it. Starts with an A. It's what? Acceleration. Acceleration clause, which is in most mortgages, stipulates if you stop paying, look what it says. It says upon default, the lender can ask you for the remaining balance of the debt at that moment. They accelerate the due date to pay it all off. So instead of 30 years, 2 years in, you stop paying, they say, we want the remaining balance right now. I thought I had 30 years. Well, the acceleration clause. Yikes. There's a clause that goes hand in hand with this. It's right here. It's called a right to reinstate clause. Usually, if you have acceleration, you might also have this. It means if the acceleration clause has already started and the lender is asking you for the remaining balance, this clause allows you to get back on track, pay some type of penalty so you're not kicked out of your house, lose your property. You'll see that here. All right, let's talk about the defeasance clause. I like to call it the defeating clause. Defeating clause. And that's kind of what you're going to see based on the description, excuse me. Once you defeat your debt, it requires the lender to take some action on your behalf. If you live in a title theory state, which Florida is not, what must the lender do? Once you defeat your debt, pay off your debt, sign the deed over to you, record it in public records. If you live in a lien theory state, which we do here in Florida, what must the lender do once you defeat your debt? Record satisfaction, remove the mortgage lien. That's detailed in front of us in that paragraph.
They quit claim that, or how do they?
No, they record satisfaction. That's how they do it. I want you to add something to this next clause so you can better understand how it works. Debt to lender is. If you add that to the complete title, debt to the lender is due on sale, then it makes sense. The debt to the lender is due upon sale. That means if you try to sell it or transfer ownership to somebody else, the lender says, you have to pay off the debt with me, whatever's owed to me. So I want you to add this. If you have this clause within your mortgage, it prevents assignment of mortgage. Write that down. This clause prevents assignment of mortgage. Do you understand why?
It doesn't carry over. You end
Exactly.
your contract right then and there.
Let's just say I sell my property to you, Dawson, and I have this clause. The lender says, pay me what's owed. You have to satisfy whatever debt you. So I need to sell the property to you for at least what I owe them. Anything over that is my proceeds, my profit. This is how it works. There is a circumstance where your debt could be assumed by another borrower. We'll come back to this, and I'll tell you the types of loans that are assumable by another borrower. So you can find somebody potentially that has an interest rate of 2%. They need to sell their property. You could potentially take over their debt and assume that 2% interest rate. It's pretty cool, right? But it only exists for certain types of mortgage loans. We'll talk about those categories later on. Prepayment you like, that means you could pay it off as early as you wish. Unless you have a prepayment penalty clause, that means if you try to pay it off early, what do? They penalize you. They charge you an additional fee. Why would they not want you to pay it off early? Because they'd be losing what? They'd be losing interest if you pay it off early. So they might impose this clause to prevent you from doing so. It's not common. For non-traditional loans, you'll see it. But for traditional financing, you typically don't. Let's move on. Mortgage features. Let's go through this briefly. Almost every mortgage loan requires that you make a what? Down payment. Certain loans do not require down payments. Sometimes you can get government assistance to cover the down payment, but there is usually some form of down payment. It's a minimum cash investment. The lender wants you to have some skin in the what? In the game. Because if you have your own money involved in the transaction, you contributed some of what you have in your bank account towards buying that property, you're less likely to what? Yeah, you're less risky. The more you contribute of your own money, the less risky you are, and the more willing the lender is to give you financing. Do you understand how it works now? The lender wants to be risk averse. And this is one way they do it, through a down payment. And depending on your qualifications, the lender might think, okay, you're a little bit more risky based on your credit score and your history. So we want more of a down payment. If you had amazing credit, you paid all your debts on time, then we would have given you 5% down. But with your qualifications, you need to contribute 10% down. They're trying to avoid risk. And that's done usually through a calculation called the LTV, loan to value ratio. I'll show you how this works. And I made a handout for you guys. The loan to value ratio, so you understand what it is, represents the percentage of the purchase price that the lender is willing to what? Finance. Here are the handouts. Pass these. And pass these. Take one, pass it. Stuck together really good. You sure? Oh, yeah. There you go. Cool. So you have the understanding of what an LTV is. You're going to be tested on this. You need to understand what it is first. What purpose does it serve? The calculation that a lender does when financing. So once again, it's the percentage that the lender is willing to give you to buy that property. That's it. It's a percentage of the loan amount. It's called the loan to value ratio. I'll come back to this calculation. We're not there yet. Let's talk about equity. Equity is the difference between what it's worth, current market value, minus what you owe. Whatever's left over is your equity. Equity is a good thing. It's a positive feature. Now, if your property is worth more than what you owe, imagine your property is worth $500,000, but you owe $300,000. You got $200,000 equity in your home. Some people use this to buy other properties by utilizing a home equity loan or a home equity line of credit. If you've heard of that before, it's like a credit card, like a debit card for your equity. And then eventually, well, it's more like a credit card, but you have to pay it back. Anyhow. Let's go to page 282. We see the whole purpose of giving you a loan is so the lender can charge you what? Interest. And the majority of your payment in the beginning of the loan term, let's just say you're making a $2,000 payment every single month for getting that loan to purchase that property. Maybe $1,600 of that $2,000 is going to go towards interest. But it changes over time. Interest is going to go down, and the principal portion of your payment that goes towards killing the debt goes up. So your payment is still $2,000, but interest and principal change places over time. That's called amortization of a loan. We'll come back to that. Whoever's collecting your mortgage loan payments is servicing the loan. That's how they describe it. You just need to know what that means. Whoever's collecting your mortgage loan payments, which could include not just principal and interest, but also taxes and insurance. They call this PITI. Have you ever heard of PITI? Principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. That's what it stands for. You'll see this on line 22. Whoever is collecting that payment from you, it might not be the bank. They might use a third party to do this because they have all the software to collect payments from you and track it. They're servicing the loan. Now, let's talk about taxes and insurance. If the lender does not trust you to make your property tax payments on time, or renew your homeowner's insurance, which is required if you get financing, the lender is going to require for you to pay for insurance. They are going to collect this money from you every single month and put it into something called a escrow or impound account, specifically for property taxes and insurance. And when those amounts become due, the county sends you your property tax bill. The lender will go into the escrow account for which they've been collecting money from you every single month, and they'll pay for the property taxes on your behalf. It's with your money, but they want to make sure it gets paid, because you could lose your property if property taxes don't get paid, right? They can auction off your property. Same thing. Imagine if a hurricane wipes out. The lender wants to be protected. They want to make sure you pay for your homeowner's insurance. This is how they do it. Discount points. Discount points. I'm going to describe this in more detail in just a moment. It's going to be one of the next things we talk about, but lenders, they manipulate borrowers in a particular way to give them the illusion that they're saving money by buying down their interest rate. Have you ever heard that? Oh, the interest rate is 6%, but you can actually pay us to bring down your interest rate. So they're still getting their money. And what is that interest rate really based off of? I'll break it down for you, and you're going to be surprised, and you're probably not going to like it. Not for the fact that it's difficult to understand. It's just, it's interesting. It's misleading, and a lot of people just don't know about it. They don't know the world of lending and what the lender is actually trying to accomplish. You think that they're looking out for your best interest. You have a 20-year history, bank accounts with BOA, Wells, Chase. You think that they're going to give you the best rate and term because of that history. I don't think so. And I'll give you some advice as to how you can get the best rate and terms when obtaining financing. And it starts with this type of education, of course, informing yourself. And on top of that, get the mortgage license so you can further educate yourself. This is just the foundation. And I'll share it with you in just a moment. So you basically pay for things called points to lower your interest rate. Loan origination fees. If you're a mortgage loan originator, this is how you can make money. Make 1-2% of the loan on top of the 2-3% you make as a real estate agent off the same transaction. It's pretty cool. If you go to the next page, page 283, now I get to discuss the calculation for LTV, loan to value ratio. Yes, it is going to be something you're tested on. Class exam question, you could lock that in. Okay. Now we can turn to our handout. The calculation is simple. Actually, the name itself gives away what the formula is. What calculation are we doing? It's called loan to value ratio. You take the loan and divide it by the value, and you get this ratio, loan to value ratio. Let's make it up. Let's say the loan is $300,000, just an example. And you take that and divide it by the value or purchase price, and or let's say it's $375,000. So now you have the numbers. Do the math. Take 300 divided by 375 and tell me what you get. Did you get 0.8 by any chance? This is expressed as a ratio, which is a percentage. What percentage is 0.8? It is 80%. But what is that actually telling us? Here it is. It's telling us this. It's telling us that the loan is 80% of the what? Purchase price or value. That's it. That means if the lender says, based on your qualifications, you want to buy the house that's $375,000, we're willing to give you an 80% LTV. That means they're willing to finance 80%. That means you have to come out of pocket for what percent? A 20% down payment. You understand how it works? I'll show you an alternative LTV formula. And the only reason you're going to have to use this is if they want you to work backwards to identify one of these components. Let me show you. Let's just say as an example, the purchase price, let's use the same number, is $375,000. And the loan is $300,000. What's the LTV? Or actually, let's do this. Let's say the LTV is 80% and the loan is $300,000. And they want you to calculate the purchase price. So how would you work backwards to get that result? This is how you figure it out. You might remember this from school. This is what we like to call the ABC formula. You might remember this from school, A times B equals C, or the Pythagorean theorem, A squared times B squared equals C squared. Your teacher said, this is basic algebra is what I'm saying. Your teacher said, if you're missing one of those variables and you have at least the other two, you can calculate the missing every single time. But you must first isolate your missing variable by itself on one side of the equation. I'm refreshing your mind, okay? This is the hardest your math is going to get. If you're good with this, once we go through this together, it clicks for you and we'll get plenty of practice. You'll be okay for the math portion. It's the hardest your math is going to be. Basic algebra. What mathematical, if you can remember from school, what mathematical symbol separates the equation from the left side to the right side? What symbol does that? What symbol separates the equation from the left side to the right side? It's the equal symbol. You remember this? It's coming back to us. And since we're trying to isolate price, purchase price, what must we get rid of to isolate it? We have to get rid of what? The 80%. What your teacher said in school was to cancel it out on one side, you divide it by the same number. But whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the what? All you need to remember is a simple rhyme to help you save some time. And that's not it. All you need to do is remember to slide and divide. Slide and divide. So you take 300,000 and you divide it by what? 80%, your LTV, and you get your result, which is what? Do the math. Divide it. 300 divided by 0.8. And you get 375,000. That's one way you might be tested, working backwards to get the purchase price based on them giving you the LTV and the loan amount. There's shortcuts. There are shortcuts. And you might remember these shortcuts from school, but if you can't remember because it's been 5, 10, 15, 20 years, that's what this time is for. Make sure that we get you back on track because you're going to be tested on it. Any questions? That's LTV. It's quite simple. You're going to have this for homework tonight, by the way. But now let's turn to discount points. Discount point calculations. Highlight lines 22 through 25, including the shaded box. I made a handout for this, by the way, the formula, but highlight it for now. Okay. And then if you go to the next page, I want you to highlight lines 11 through 16, including the shaded box. I put both of these on the handout that I passed around to you guys. And it simplifies it. There's two calculations of points. You're not going to like either one of them because of how manipulative the lender is, how they utilize them. The math is not hard. It's just basic memorization. Let's turn to this handout. I want to show you what we highlighted last, which was lenders yield by points. Lenders charge points to make more income for themselves. It's a big part of their business. They try to nickel and dime. Most lenders nowadays make more money off of you as a borrower by giving you the loan, originating the loan for you, because of all these points, lenders' fees and charges up front, versus the interest that they'll make off of you by holding on to your debt or collecting the interest over the years. And that's why most lenders now, they'll sell your debt. You understand what I'm saying? They're not going to, you're like, why would they sell it? Why wouldn't they want to make all that interest? It's because they're not in it for that. It's less risky to charge you $20,000, $30,000 up front to give you the loan and then sell your debt, get reimbursed, and then charge the next borrower $20,000, $30,000, pocket that cash for giving them the $300,000 loan. Do you understand? They're recirculating the same money. I give you a $300,000 loan, but I'm charging you 20 grand in fees for me to give you the loan, just to do business with me. That has nothing to do with the 300,000. I pocket that cash. So what I do is, after you make a couple months payments, I take your debt, the 300,000 that I originated for you, I sell it to her. I get reimbursed. She's another lender. She'll buy the debt from me because she's in it for the interest. I'm not. I get my $300,000 back that I lent to you, and I give somebody else that same $300,000, make 20, 30 grand off of them. You see the name of the game? You see the business and how they operate? It's pretty conniving. But let's focus. When the lender makes yield through points, you got to remember this. Every point will increase the lender's yield interest by 1/8%. So if they charge you 1 point, that's 1/8% increase to your true interest rate, what you really qualify for. Let's just say you qualify for 5%. That's what you really qualify for. But the lender wants to charge points because they like to make more money off of you as much as they can. Let's say 4 points. I'm just making it up. How is that going to affect your true interest rate? Well, you have to convert it. Take the 4 points, multiply it by 0.125. That's the same thing as 1/8%, by the way. This is just decimal form. It's the same thing as 1/8%. 1/8%, same thing, equals this. And what do you get? Multiply by 0.125. Tell me what you get. Yeah. Everybody should be doing the math. I got 0.5%. Is that what you got? You got 0.5? That's 0.5%, correct? On top of what you really qualify for. So what do? They add it. They add it onto your true interest. The book is not going to tell you this. I'm telling you the truth. So what interest rate do they propose that you qualify for based on what you really qualify for and the points they're charging you? 5.5%. You're like, gosh, man, I thought rates were less than this. I guess it is what it is. Somewhat. APR is a little bit different. I'm going to talk about that later on. Bear with me. But you don't like it. You're thinking, I feel like I had a friend that just got a loan. They got 5%, and I feel like I had better qualifications from them. We had an open conversation about it. I mean, they just got the loan. I should be qualified for 5% or better. Why is it 0.5% more? That's going to cost you a lot over the loan term, just 0.5% more. They say, oh, the lender says, oh, don't worry. You can actually buy down your rate. You can pay for these points so we can discount your interest rate to give you what you really qualify for. It's silly. You have to go in with the intention of negotiation. And you can negotiate with lenders. You think that it is what it is. No. The best advice I can give you, and what most people don't do, is to shop around. And the reason why people are discouraged from shopping around is because when you pull credit, yes, it does affect your credit score. Doesn't it hit your credit score for several points? And you're thinking, if I keep on pulling my credit with shopping around with all these lenders, my credit score is going to get obliterated. And then I won't get the most attractive rate. No. Yes, you do get hit for the first inquiry, but you have 30 days from that point to shop around and pull credit as many times as you wish to try to find the best rate and terms. And what you'll find out, what you'll discover through this process, is that they compete with each other. You never even give it a chance because you go to Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Chase, whoever you have your bank account with for 10, 15 years, and you only give them the chance. Psychologically speaking, most lenders know you won't shop around, especially the big banks. They've done a lot of research on this. It's going to be tough to hear this, but those lenders who you have an established relationship with, whoever you bank with for a long term, you think that because of that relationship, they're going to give you the best. They won't. Most of the time, they give you the worst. And when they pull credit, they can see your credit report and see if you pulled your credit with any other lenders. So if they know that you have a bank account with them for 10, 15 years, and you gave them the first shot at it, psychologically speaking, most people won't go any further than that. They're thinking, I can only get a loan from this bank who I have a bank account with and have history with. No. And they'll hit you with the worst. Isn't that sad? And then when you go shopping around and you find out there's all these lenders that exist and they're willing to give me more attractive terms, you go back to Chase or whoever it is. You say, what's going on here? You guys, I've had a bank account with you guys for 10, 15 years. What's going on? Oh, you got a better rate and term from somewhere else. Can you show it to us? Oh, we can match it. We could try to beat it. Well, why don't you do that from the very beginning? We have a relationship with each other, right? You're a number. You are a number. And it's a game. And some people play the money game better than others. So you got to play the money game better and be prepared. And that's why you're in this class. I think you're here for a reason. Whatever you're going through in life, if you are eventually or you're looking to become a homeowner, you need to know this stuff. That's why this class should be required senior year of high school or somewhere throughout your academic career. Be required. Financial literacy is so important. This is not in the textbook, what I'm sharing with you. All this nuance and things that I'm sharing with the insight and what's really going on, but it's important for you to hear it. I think you'd agree with that. So what happens if you don't like the 5.5% and you want to get what you really qualify for? Don't worry. Yes, you can pay to buy down your rate. And that's through cost in dollars by points. Let me show you how that works. By the way, remember these triggering words here. Lender's yield, cost in dollars. That's the wording that they'll use to identify what calculation you're going to make. If it's lender's yield, it's that first calculation. Now let's talk about cost in dollars. And how do you calculate? Well, each point is equal to 1% of the loan. So that means if you have a certain number of points, what do we use for the previous example? We said 4 points, right? And you want to remove those 4 points. There's a cost for that. Each point is 1% of the loan. 1 point, 1% of the loan. 2 points, 2%. What if the loan is, what do we say, 300,000? The loan is 300,000. And you want to remove 4 points, but we have to convert them. Each point is equal to 1%. So it's a 1-for-1 conversion. So it's 4 points would mean how much? You want to remove 4 points? It's going to cost you 4% of the loan. 4%, do the math. $12,000 is correct. The lender is saying basically, give me $12,000 so I don't charge you those points and give you the interest rate you really qualify for. How crazy is that? The whole point is to not pay the points, and you can negotiate not to pay points, yes. Almost every lender nowadays charges points. Yes, yeah. Traditionally, credit unions do have better terms and rate. They say they're a nonprofit lender. I chuckle when I hear that. I always give my clients several, exactly. That's how you got to do. So Abby is saying she gives her clients several options. And if you get the mortgage license, it helps you even further because you have a better understanding of how it works. You can convey the understanding to the borrower a little bit better. And you know you're going to establish relationships with lenders that give the best rate in terms. Let's go back. Yeah. Let's go back to our textbook. And now we can go to page 285. 285, we see assignment of mortgage. Assignment, just like it sounds, assigning your debt to somebody else. Assigning the responsibility to pay the debt to somebody else. Just as long as there's no what clause contained within, you'll probably see it in the previous paragraph if I'm not mistaken. No, it's not here. It's the what prevents assignment of mortgage we saw earlier. Do you remember? Do you remember?
Yes, I do. It's
The due on sale clause. Yes. Assignment of mortgage could be accomplished unless there's a due on sale clause. Remember the due on sale? The lender says, upon sale, the debt is due and payable to us. So if you try to transfer your debt to somebody else, the lender says, I don't think so. You have the due on sale clause. And that's why some people will use subject to existing mortgage. They'll buy the property subject to an existing debt. We'll talk about what that means in just a moment. What's an estoppel certificate? It's just to verify the loan balance. But it could be used to verify other types of balances and debts and to make sure the borrower is in good standing with HOA. For instance, when a property is sold and the property is located in a community where there's an HOA and you have to pay dues every single month, for instance, you need to make sure that the seller, the owner of that property is up to date. They're in good standing with their HOA dues. So you would do that by going to the homeowners association and requesting an estoppel certificate. They might just call it estoppel, just simple name in our business. Did you request the estoppel from the HOA, from the condo association, from the lender, the payoff balance? Let's move on. Go to page 286. We already talked about this assumption of an existing mortgage. But specifically, you'll see right here, assumption of a mortgage. Somebody else taking over the debt. All parties have to sign something called the novation agreement. So if the seller wants to be completely free of any liability associated with the previous debt, they all sign the novation agreement. Novation substitutes a new party for the original party. So you have a new borrower taking the position of the original borrower. But then we come across subject to. Have you ever heard of this? There's a lot of videos on social media floating around with subject to. Have you heard of this? You follow wholesalers and subject to, okay. So what's going on with this? Sure, my light is on. If there's a due on sale clause, then it prevents somebody else from assuming the debt. God bless you. But they have a great interest rate. They got 2%, 3%, something like this. I really want to get that rate because rates are at 7% right now. But because of the due on sale clause, how do we work around that? You could use subject to. So instead of you transferring the debt to me, we'll have a contract that says I'm going to pay your debt to the lender. So the debt still stays in your name as the original borrower, but I have a contract with you that says I'm going to make your monthly mortgage loan payments for you every single month. I'm legally bound to it. You sign the deed over to me. And typically what the investor will do is put a tenant in the property that's willing to pay more in rent than what the mortgage loan payments are every single month. Because if your mortgage loan payment, because you have a low interest rate, is $1,600, principal, interest, taxes, insurance, everything considered. But this property rents out for $2,400 a month. I can sign a contract that says I'll pay the $1,600, put a tenant in there that's willing to pay $2,400, and I pocket $800 every single month. And you're thinking, why would somebody agree to this? Because then the original borrower is still on the hook for the debt. If I stop paying, what happens as the investor? If I stop paying, then based on the contract, I have to sign the deed back over to you. But then you're right back in the same position where we started. You understand? I can paint it to make it sound very attractive, where a homeowner might go for it. I say, hey, listen, you can't afford the debt, but I'll agree to pay off your debt. I'm going to pay the debt for you every single month. And since your credit is not in a good shape, by me paying every single month, I'm improving your credit score. Doesn't that sound attractive to you? So there's ways you can paint it, and there's other things I can say. But the best case scenario for the owner of the property is to sell it. Why would they just sell it? You don't know the circumstance, though. Yes, because then they have the debt to income ratio that they have to deal with. If they're still on the hook for the original debt, that's going to show up on their credit report. Even though it's getting paid every single month, it's still messing up their debt to income ratio. It's a good point. Contract for deed. I've done this on a number of occasions. Contract for deed is where it's like a title theory state. You know title theory? The lender holds on to the deed until you pay off the debt with him. As an investor, I've done something similar, which is called a contract for deed. So we have a contract that says that you're going to pay off the debt with me over a certain time period, with the interest rate, whatever we negotiate. And after you pay off the debt with me, I'll sign the deed over to you. Just like a title theory state. And it's called contract for deed. It gives the buyer equitable title in the property. If you remember what equitable title is, it gives them, it basically means they're going to receive ownership rights at a later date, but it also gives them the ability to homestead the property. That contract still gives them the ability to homestead. You'll see that as the next sentence. If you go to the next page, page 287, the seller retains legal title to the property until the debt is repaid. I just mentioned that to you, but it's part of the question you're going to be tested on. Let's move on. I'll be brief here for land development loans. Let's go through this together. Land development loans. Contractors, developers will use the bank to finance development of the entire subdivision. If you think that they have to go into it cash, no. Most of them they finance. We're talking about large sums of money, tens of millions of dollars, as you can imagine, but it's over a certain time period. They don't give them a large lump sum. As the community is developed, they pay out little by little. So that's what a construction loan is. Blanket mortgage loans. I mentioned I would come back to this. We saw it in Unit 11. And the last time we saw this in Unit 11 was in relation to fraudulent activity. If you don't disclose to the buyer that the property is within a blanket mortgage, it's fraudulent. Why? What does a blanket do, first of all, so you can better understand? A blanket what? Yeah, it's one loan that covers multiple properties. Developers do this. Imagine they have multiple lots, but all the lots, before they build the houses on them, are under one blanket debt that they have with whatever lender. And then as they build the houses, they pull money from the lender for construction costs. So they pay for it up front and then they get reimbursed. That's usually how it works. You have to disclose this to a prospective buyer. They have to be aware of this. And because they have to know that once they pay a certain amount for the property, then the lender is going to release title to them, ownership rights. And you'll see that here. It's called a partial release clause. found in blanket mortgages provides for a lease of an individual parcel from under the blanket when the borrower pays a specified amount. Okay. I would say highlight this for personal reasons, a buy down. This is a clever tool that you could use when interest rates are high, like right now. If you have a buyer that really wants to purchase, but they don't qualify because interest rates are high, you can negotiate for the seller to buy down the buyer's rate. It's a rate buy down is what it's called. That's possible in our business. It's a temporary buy down, by the way. Temporarily lower the interest rate so the borrower can qualify. Let's move on. Yes, temporary. It's just so they can get their foot in the door and qualify. But over the next few years, it goes back up to the rate that they really qualify for. It's a tool. It's a clever tool to get the transaction done. And it's acceptable in our business. Let's talk about our last subject, which is default, which means the borrower stops paying. You remember the two documents that go hand in hand with one another that we discussed in the very beginning of this unit? The first thing we described? The mortgage and the what? The promissory note. So let's review that. The borrower signs the mortgage to pledge the property as collateral. They also sign the promissory note as a promise to repay the debt, and it outlines the details of the debt that they promised to repay. So what if they break their promise? They break the promissory note. Then the mortgage allows the lender to what? Take the property. Because remember, the borrower pledged the property as collateral. So if you stop paying, they take the property. But there's a legal action you have to go through in order to accomplish that. It's a judicial process. In Florida, we call it foreclosure. You've heard of foreclosure, right? So here's the thing. When you get the loan from the lender, but you still owe them money, what do they place against your property? A lien. It's called a mortgage lien. The lien stays attached until you satisfy the debt, but what if you stop paying? Well, now they file a foreclosure, which is basically a lawsuit to enforce the mortgage lien. The mortgage lien allows them to take the property. When they go to court, they say, hey, we're filing a lawsuit against a mortgage lien. Here's the mortgage that says they pledged the property. Here's the promissory note. And here's evidence that they broke their promise. They didn't pay for the last whatever days, and we contacted them and so forth. If the judge agrees with the lender, then the lender can take the property. Most lenders, they first send it to auction versus just taking the property. They'll send it to auction hosted by the county. The county will host this auction for which that property is located. If a property was foreclosed on in Orange County will take care of the auction. And now the auctions are online for Orange County, at least, in several counties throughout the state of Florida. So you could be bidding against somebody in California. It's competitive for that reason. And Florida is a big investor market as well. Just think about that. This is one of the auctions that I attend. You register as a bidder. You have to deposit money into the bidder's account, basically like an escrow account, bidder's account. And then when you win, they take the money. You have to have at least 5% of the winning bid. And then you have within 24 hours to come up with the remaining balance. It's a cash business. Let me explain how that works. So I already shared this with you. There is just another feature that I want to share with you before we move on to the next page. There is an opportunity for you to stop foreclosure so you don't lose your property. It's called equity of redemption. It's a right for you to stop the foreclosure action, but you have to pay whatever penalties, whatever fees to get back on track, all the way up to the sale date. On page 289, the result from foreclosure. Your credit is going to be obliterated. Foreclosure stays on your credit report for how long? 7 years. And they'll send your property to auction. So let's talk about that auction. It's in this next paragraph. If they sell it at auction for more than what you owed, This happens, especially with market home prices going up in value and what you originally paid for it. You bought the property, or let's say you owe the lender $200,000, but they sell it at auction for $300,000. What happens with the remaining amount? Do you get that money as a borrower? Well, you should, but the lender will try to absorb as much as they can with legal fees. And you'll see the legal fees will absolutely be ridiculous, so they leave no meat on the bone. But if there is money left over, any excess proceeds are to be paid to the mortgagor. The mortgagor is the borrower who's always poor. What if the property is sold for less than what you owe? You owed $300, but they sold it at auction for $200 because that's all they can get. The lender might go back to court, take you to court, and try to get a deficiency judgment against you. Deficiency, the difference. So they're trying to file a lawsuit against you for the remaining $100,000 that they think you owe to them. And that's a debt that's going to follow you wherever you go. Unless you file for what? Yeah, the big B, which is bankruptcy. Bankruptcy stays on your credit report for how long? 10 years. And then you become a pariah. Good luck trying to get financing. Long road ahead. Anyhow, you want to avoid that at all costs. Check this out. A lot of people get confused with what a short sale is. Some people think it's a quick sale. It's not a quick sale. If we're talking about time, it should be called a long sale. It's when you're selling the property short. You're selling it for less than what you owe to the bank. Let's just say you bought the property at the peak of the market, but the market has corrected. Might sound familiar. And your property is worth less than what you paid for it. But you have to sell it right now. You can go to the lender and try to get them to accept a short sale. Basically, market the property for what it's worth today. And this is when they pay a local broker for a BPO, broker's price opinion, to confirm what market value is for that property and what you can list it for and market it for. And they if they agree to it and you put it on their MLS and it's sold, they agree to take less than what you owe to them. They can't come after you for the remaining balance. They have to agree to this. It should be called a long sale because it takes 3 to 6 months to close on this type of deal. From the time you get an offer to actual bank approval and closing. Most people think that foreclosure is the end all be all. They think, okay, I can't afford to hold on to this property anymore. I'm just going to wait till the bank kicks me out. I'll just try to delay this process as much as possible. It's not a great strategy because you have alternatives. You have options. It's called deed in lieu of foreclosure. You speak French. What does in lieu of mean? In lieu. In lieu. In lieu. Right here. You see it? It means instead of, or in place of. So you signed the deed over to the lender instead of them filing what against you? Foreclosure. Probably the best thing to do is sell the property, right? Rather than sign over the deed and walk away, especially if you have equity in the property. I mean, but it is what it is. If you just got the loan, the lender's not going to agree to this. But if you've been paying your debt over 10 years and then you say, hey, listen, I lost my job. There's no way I'm going to be able to afford to hold on to this any longer. Can I sign the deed over to you and walk away so you don't start the foreclosure action against me? If they agree to it, that's what it's called. This is before foreclosure has started. If foreclosure has already been filed, you can't do this anymore. And the only thing you can do is equity of redemption, which we already discussed. Last two things. If you have an income producing property that's in default, you have an investment property, you're renting it out. You stop paying your debt to a lender, but you're still collecting you're still collecting rental payments from your tenants. You think the lender is going to let that slide? No. They will assign somebody through the receivership clause as a receiver appointed to collect the income from that property so you don't try to pocket the cash. if you want to find out if a property is in default, lis pendens would have been filed in public records. Lis pendens is Latin. It means action pending. It's a warning that a lawsuit has been filed against that property. And sometimes real estate agents use this to get leads. They go to public records. They see all the lis pendens that were recently filed, properties that are just in foreclosure. And rather than losing your property, the best thing to do is to sell it. I can help you sell it. So you approach them in that way. Make sense? Just be careful with this. Cold calling people and so forth. DNC lists. Do not call lists. We already talked about that in Unit 5. Any questions here? We're done with this unit, which means we're done with our session for today. How you guys feel? Good. Units 11 and 12, great units, right? A lot of good information. Unit 13 and 15 are tomorrow. Why not 14? Unit 13 is the longest unit in the textbook. Unit 15 is the shortest unit. That's why. I changed the order. If we completed Unit 13, the longest unit in the textbook, and I say, well, wait a second, we're not done yet. Now let's do most of the math you're going to be tested on. You're going to hate me. I don't want you guys to like me. So I split it up. Tomorrow's going to be 13 and 15. If we can squeeze in another unit, great. The day after, 14 and 18. And then the day after that, 16, 17, 19. All right. Push your chairs, clean up your mess, drive safe. God bless.
Oh,
We'll
quick
see
question.
you. Yes. Question. Talk to me.
When is the class test?
Yes. We just had that question earlier. Let me share it with you once
Right.
again. You have within 30 days, starting from the first day of class, to wrap up everything with us.
Okay.
And you take it online through our website, through your user account. So you log in, you'll see when you click on the course you registered for, the course you're taking right now, you'll see the link that says final exam or final quiz or whatever it says. It's not available. It's locked right now, but at the end of the class, it will unlock. And you have by February 19th to pass it or attempt.
Okay.
But you
So
should
it's
pass.
so I just take it through my computer.
Online, yes.
Okay. I see.
I mean, it's open book.
La 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 la, la.
That's good. Yeah, okay. There we go.
All right. With that being said, pushing your chairs, clean up your mess, drive safe. God bless. I will see you mañana. Take care.
I'll get up online.